Beneath the sun-scorched ridges and jagged cliffs of the Grand Canyon, secrets linger where even the most experienced explorers hesitate to tread. Here, in shadowed crevices and along the river's turbulent currents, strange lights flicker, vanishing footprints appear without explanation, and whispered echoes of the past refuse to fade. Across hidden tunnels, remote overlooks and abandoned survey sites, artifacts and recordings hint at events so baffling they were quietly archived, dismissed or concealed. On this journey, you will move through the canyon's hidden corridors, tracing the paths of lost hikers, shadowy figures, and inexplicable phenomena that defy reason, discovering the peculiar intersections of history, nature, and the unexplained. Each revelation offers not answers, but glimpses into a canyon that conceals more than it reveals, and invites you to confront mysteries that refuse to be forgotten. The 1928 Marble Canyon river runner who vanished mid-rapid. The early river runners of the American Southwest left behind stories that were shaped as much by the silence of the wilderness as by the journals and photographs they carried, and among the sparsest of these accounts is the brief and unsettling record of a solo boater who disappeared somewhere within Marble Canyon in late 1928. The Colorado River was already known for swallowing expeditions without warning, yet few incidents from that era feel quite as hollow as this one, a case mentioned only in passing across scattered notes from river stations and local newspapers. It is within this thin historical outline that the mystery takes shape, because what little remains suggests not a dramatic catastrophe, but rather something quieter, as though the canyon absorbed the man without a sound. Rugged and narrow, Marble Canyon begins at Lee's Ferry, the historic dividing line between the upper Colorado and the deeper descent into the Grand Canyon. By 1928, the river corridor was still largely uncharted for recreational travel, and only a handful of experienced boatmen had ever attempted the stretch, each bringing wooden boats that were ill-suited for the violent hydraulics waiting downstream. The disappearance noted that year appears in proximity to this geography, aligning with a season when the river ran moderately high, and the weather remained stable, producing a combination that should not have posed an immediate threat to a careful traveller. Yet the official fragments never describe high water, broken equipment, or storm conditions, which leaves historians wondering how an entire rivercraft managed to be found intact while its occupant was nowhere in sight. A few references that survive come from the vicinity of Lee's Ferry, where ferry operators in the 1920s often spoke informally with travellers before they began the descent into Marble Canyon. Reports from that time note that a single boat was seen launching with provisions secured carefully in the bow and stern compartments, an arrangement typical of river runners who understood the challenges ahead. While the ferry logs from 1928 no longer exist in complete form, several regional archives mention the presence of an unnamed man travelling alone that autumn, someone who declined assistance and seemed confident in reading the river's shifting currents. No confirmed identification was ever attached to this person, which contributes to the peculiar opacity that has surrounded the case ever since. Downstream from Lee's Ferry, Marble Canyon reveals a corridor that alternates between broad stretches of calm water and sudden rapids that narrow dramatically between polished limestone walls. Early river runners often remarked that these transitions could be deceptive, for long miles of smooth current encouraged complacency before the river folded abruptly into turbulent drops and hidden rocks. In the 1928 incident, observers later noted that the abandoned boat showed no evidence of impact or splintering, details that complicate theories of a catastrophic capsize. The hull remained intact, the oars rested on the thwarts, and the storage compartments held food and gear undisturbed, a condition that suggests the craft did not tumble through a rapid, but rather came to rest gently against an eddy or gravel bar. The river rescue practices of the early 20th century were rudimentary at best, relying heavily on chance sightings by passing surveyors, prospectors, or other boaters. When the empty craft was found, it was not accompanied by footprints leading away from the shoreline, nor was there any indication of items being dragged or salvaged. This scenario raises a troubling question that has echoed across historical discussions of the case. How does a boat survive untouched while its operator vanishes so completely that even a tentative trail cannot be followed? In the Grand Canyon, accidents typically leave scars on the landscape, whether through scattered gear, sand-printed evidence, or the marks of someone attempting to climb to higher ground, yet nothing consistent with such a struggle ever surfaced. contemporary speculation drew comparisons to other early disappearances on the Colorado River, including the better-known 1928 case of Glen and Bessie Hyde, whose scow was discovered months later downstream. Yet the Marble Canyon incident remains distinct because it involved a single traveller and a boat that showed none of the stress expected after confrontations with the canyon's larger rapids. Search efforts at the time were constrained by distance and limited manpower, and although inquiries were said to have been made at settlements along the river corridor, no one ever stepped forward with knowledge of the missing traveller's identity. The absence of a name or origin is one of the most striking portions of the case, for it leaves the mystery suspended without the basic anchor of personal history. Marble Canyon itself offers no easy answers. Its steep walls restrict access to higher mesas, and many exit routes are concealed within talus slopes or slot canyons that require careful navigation. For an experienced boatman, losing access to the boat would have created an immediate emergency, yet earlier accounts of abandoned vessels in the Grand Canyon often include signs of attempted escape or improvised shelter. In this 1928 disappearance, nothing of the sort appeared. It is as if the man stepped away from the boat and never placed another mark upon the landscape, a scenario that contradicts the typical traces left by river accidents in the decades that followed. Researchers who revisited the minimal archival entries decades later have noted that the incident appeared briefly in a few small publications before fading from recorded river history. Some assume that officials simply lacked details to investigate further, while others believe that the absence of a known identity made the matter difficult to pursue. What remains unusual is how thoroughly the case slipped from public attention, particularly given the increasing interest in early Grand Canyon expeditions during the mid-20th century. Most river narratives from that period were preserved in personal diaries or newspaper features, yet the 1928 Marble Canyon disappearance survives in only the faintest mentions, creating an unsettling vacuum around the event. Physical conditions along the Colorado River in 1928 offer additional context. The river flowed freely then, uninterrupted by the later construction of Glen Canyon Dam, meaning that seasonal variations in sediment, water temperature, and current velocity were more pronounced. Even so, the stretch of Marble Canyon where the abandoned boat was said to have been found does not correspond with the most dangerous rapids, and the boat's condition further rules out a violent overturn. This has led some historians to propose possibilities ranging from a sudden medical emergency to an accidental fall into the water during a moment of inattention, though none of these hypotheses fully satisfy the lack of physical evidence. The geography of the canyon provides another layer of complexity, for its walls and side canyons hold recesses that conceal evidence for decades. Flash floods, rockfall, and shifting sand can erase signs of human passage, and the timeless erosion of the river itself constantly reshapes accessible surfaces. Yet despite these natural factors, the absence of any follow-up discoveries, whether equipment or human remains, reinforces the inherent mystery of the 1928 disappearance. Many lost hikers or early explorers were eventually found, even if decades later, but this case left nothing to reclaim. The early history of river running includes its own folklore, and some storytellers have suggested that the Marble Canyon disappearance became deliberately downplayed as other events demanded attention, including the Hyde case that absorbed national interest. Whether true or not, such suppression would have been easy given the limited and fragmented documentation. Park staff of the era sometimes recorded events informally, jotting observations in personal notebooks that never entered official archives. It is therefore possible that details once existed in private collections now lost to time, leaving only the sparse references that survived through secondary accounts. While the Colorado River corridor eventually became one of the most studied and travelled waterways in the world, its early period remains shadowed by gaps in written history. The disappearance of the Marble Canyon river runner stands among those gaps, a stark reminder of how the canyon's vastness can erase the passage of a single person with little trace. The few verifiable elements point toward a situation that should have left more evidence than it did, deepening the sense that something about the incident does not align cleanly with the patterns known from other historical river accidents. Some mysteries survive because they resist elaboration, and the 1928 Marble Canyon disappearance persists precisely because it holds so little upon which certainty can rest. The strange lights reported above Desert View Watchtower in 1934. High above the eastern rim, the land around Desert View settles into a quiet that seems to widen with every mile of open sky. The high plateau feels different here, almost as if the horizon stretches farther than it should, and the vast openness surrounding the watchtower draws the eye toward the distant edges of the canyon where the cliffs descend in uneven terraces. The silence that holds in the late hours carries a crispness that amplifies even the faintest sounds, leaving the night with a depth most visitors notice immediately. It was in this setting, under a sky untouched by city glow, that several observers in 1934 reported seeing strange lights hovering above the Desert View watchtower, a moment so unexpected that it has persisted in small fragments of park history, despite never being formally explained. The canyon's night air, free from moisture and haze, creates a clarity that leaves little room for illusions, yet these sightings have resisted explanation for nearly a century. From the moment the watchtower was completed in 1932, its presence became a fixed point against the vastness of the canyon's horizon. Designed by architect Emery Kolb and inspired by ancestral towers found throughout the southwest, the structure held both cultural resonance and practical function, serving as a high observation point for visitors seeking a panoramic view of the canyon. Rising from the rim with its circular stone form, the watchtower quickly became one of the most recognizable silhouettes along the south rim. By 1934, it had already drawn thousands of travelers, many of whom remarked on the panoramic views and the reach of the night sky visible from its upper platform. In that same year, the accounts of unusual lights drifting above the tower surfaced quietly, mentioned not in official reports, but in the recollections of those who witnessed them. The earliest note of unusual lights drifting above the tower in 1934 appears almost casually in surviving accounts, as though the observers struggled to describe what they saw. Descriptions use cautious language, avoiding definitive terms and instead leaning on words that reveal uncertainty, a glow, a wandering light, a suspended shimmer. These were not formal testimonies, but remarks passed along in letters, journals, and later retellings, each capturing a sense of hesitation. The observers did not agree on the shape of the light, but concurred on its behaviour: slow movement, steady brightness, and an absence of sound, an unusual combination for the time. These early mentions do not attempt to categorise the lights, which makes them even more intriguing, especially when viewed through the lens of what was known about aerial activity in the region. Evening conditions on the south rim often produce a clarity that sharpens every star, making any deviation in the sky impossible to ignore. With little moisture in the air and the higher elevation reducing atmospheric distortion, the night sky at Desert View carries a purity that allows distant objects to appear sharper than expected. Moonless nights reveal layers of starlight, and the depth of darkness between constellations forms a backdrop against which any moving light stands out unmistakably. In 1934, when artificial sky glow was almost non-existent in the region, the watchers had an unobstructed view stretching many miles, making any anomaly in the air a noticeable event. The conditions that year were typical for the rim, offering no unusual environmental factors that might account for the strange lights. Over several nights that year, a pattern of quiet sightings began to form, each one echoing details from the last without matching it completely. Some described the light as hovering at a fixed altitude, while others noted a slow climb or descent that defied their expectations of natural night phenomena. A few accounts spoke of a pulsing quality, not rapid or erratic, but a faint alteration in brightness that seemed deliberate. What ties these reports together is not uniformity, but consistency in broad features: silence, sustained visibility, and a path that was neither linear nor chaotic. The fact that multiple sightings occurred over separate evenings suggests the event was not a singular optical illusion or isolated weather anomaly. Attempts to explain the phenomenon within the practical limits of 1930s aviation fall short when compared to the distances and altitudes involved. In 1934, the Grand Canyon area had no nearby airports, and commercial flights did not pass over the region with any regularity. Aircraft capable of hovering or manoeuvring slowly in place did not exist, and even the nearest small planes would have produced unmistakable engine noise. No known surveying equipment, military activity, or searchlights were recorded in the vicinity during those nights. For those trying to reconcile the lights with known technology of the time, the silence becomes one of the most perplexing features, as even distant aircraft would have produced audible cues in the canyon's open air. Natural illusions, usually the easiest explanation for unusual light, seem insufficient once the behaviours described in those reports are examined closely. Temperature inversions can produce distortions along the horizon, and airborne particles can reflect distant sources of brightness. But none of these conditions account for hovering movement or shifts in altitude. Meteor activity, while common, follows straight and rapid paths, not slow drifting arcs. Reflections from campfires or lanterns cannot rise above the canyon rim, and no weather phenomena observed in the region create a stable, elevated light visible from multiple angles. The inability of natural explanations to align with the described behaviour adds a layer of complexity to the 1934 incident. Official park records from the era rarely addressed unexplained incidents directly, leaving events like the 1934 lights suspended in partial silence. The National Park Service of the early 20th century tended to exclude unusual occurrences from formal documentation unless they directly affected safety or property. As a result, anomalous sightings were often passed along informally, left to personal notes, letters, and private conversations rather than written reports. This pattern is consistent with other historical cases from the canyon, where unusual observations failed to appear in official logs despite multiple witnesses. For the strange lights over Desert View, this silence allowed the event to fade from public memory, even though it remained vivid in the recollections of those who saw it. Despite the scarcity of documentation, the consistency among the independent witnesses remains one of the most intriguing elements of the case. The accounts came from visitors and staff with no evident connection to each other, reducing the likelihood of shared influence or misinterpretation. Each described a light that behaved in ways that defied easy categorization, yet their descriptions showed enough overlap to suggest they were observing the same phenomenon. The absence of conflicting details strengthens the sense that something unusual transpired above the watchtower during that period. These shared elements form the foundation of the mystery that endures to this day. Standing as both landmark and lookout, the watchtower becomes a kind of still observer in these accounts, its height turning it into part of the story itself. The tower's upper levels offer an unobstructed panoramic view, enabling those inside to see far across the canyon and the desert beyond. In 1934, with the structure still relatively new, it served as a gathering point for visitors seeking expansive views, including those who later described the lights. Its presence anchors the event geographically and symbolically, reinforcing the sense that this vantage point was uniquely suited for capturing the mysterious display in the sky. The watchtower remains central to the narrative, even though it played no active role in the event. Decades later, researchers revisiting the old notes found themselves facing the same uncertainty that confronted observers in 1934. Without formal records, photographs, or physical evidence, modern interpretations rely heavily on the fragmented testimonies that survived informally. Scholars of atmospheric phenomena considered whether rare conditions might have produced localized reflections or airborne anomalies, yet none of these possibilities fully align with the reported movements. Historians familiar with early aviation dismissed the idea of aircraft involvement, emphasizing the technological limits of the time. The mystery stands unresolved despite attempts to interpret it through contemporary knowledge. What remains unexplained is how multiple descriptions converge on similar shapes and movements, while offering no clear explanation. Observers described lights that shifted position without abrupt acceleration, maintained altitude, and emitted a steady glow, behaviours that do not correspond to known natural or mechanical sources. The lack of sound continues to be one of the most striking details, particularly in an environment where noise travels freely. The absence of corroborating documentation leaves the event open-ended, yet the surviving accounts align too closely to dismiss as mere coincidence. The unanswered aspects contribute to an unsettling sense of the unknown. Even now, nearly a century later, the quiet of the rim seems to carry a memory of that strange season when lights moved above the tower in ways that should not have been possible. The phantom whistles of Glen Canyon miners. The morning air in Glen Canyon carries a chill that slips between the rock walls, stirring even the faintest vibrations of the earth beneath. Sunlight gradually spills over the canyon's ridges, casting long shadows that stretch across narrow gullies, highlighting the uneven surfaces where miners would have worked in the early 20th century. It is here, amid the echoing crevices and steep drops, that reports of phantom whistles first emerged. soft, eerie tones that seemed neither mechanical nor natural, yet carried over distances in a way that unsettled those who heard them. The sound, fleeting yet distinct, threaded through the labyrinthine canyon with a persistence that would later puzzle observers and historians alike. In the early 1900s, miners worked the narrow shafts and open pits of Glen Canyon, extracting ore under conditions both grueling and isolated. These small-scale operations were scattered, and the workers relied on hand tools, timber supports, and primitive carts to move materials through confined spaces. Long hours in near silence amplified every ambient sound, from shifting rocks to distant wildlife. But miners began noticing something different. Whistles that seemed to have no origin, slipping through tunnels and spilling across cliffs without any apparent source. The physical labour and solitude of these mining activities made every sound significant, and the unexplained tones left an impression that lingered long after the shift ended. Amid these laborious routines, reports began to emerge of whistling sounds that seemed to float along the tunnels and across the open cliffs. Some miners described them as high-pitched, like faint calls echoing across the ridges, while others reported lower, more resonant tones that reverberated through these shafts. These sounds were silent in origin, in that no machinery could produce them at the time, and yet their presence was undeniable. Observers struggled to reconcile what they heard with the tools at hand, and for those working in complete isolation, the phenomenon became both unsettling and impossible to ignore, leaving an imprint on the collective memory of the canyon's labourers. The canyon's unique topography transformed sound, bending it along crevices and echoing it across ridges in ways that confound perception. Narrow passageways can create multiple reflections, causing a single source to appear as if it moves or multiplies. Elevated cliffs act as natural amplifiers, carrying faint noises far beyond the point of origin. These factors offered plausible explanations for ordinary echoes or wind-blown sounds, but the whistle reports defied normal acoustic patterns. Observers noted that the sound sometimes moved independently of environmental shifts, seeming to float or linger where there was no wind or mechanical cause. On certain nights, the whistles repeated with a rhythm that felt deliberate, observed by individuals and small groups who could not locate the source. Miners described sequences of high and low tones, sometimes punctuated by brief silences that suggested intention without conveying meaning. In the stillness of the canyon, these sounds carried farther than anticipated, appearing to interact with the canyon's contours in unpredictable ways. Some workers noted that the whistles would fade just as they approached, only to reappear in a different shaft or above a ridge, a pattern that could not easily be explained by known acoustic behaviour. The creaking of timber supports, the clatter of ore carts, and the hiss of primitive drills might mimic certain tones, yet the phantom quality persisted beyond ordinary explanation. Even accounting for mechanical echoes and human error, the whistles remained distinct in their precision and timing. Observers frequently described the sound as pure and unbroken, maintaining a tone that was inconsistent with the sudden, uneven noises produced by mining equipment. The contrast between human-created sounds and the elusive ghost-like whistles heightened the mystery, reinforcing the sense that the canyon itself was producing, or at least holding, an unidentifiable voice. Deep alcoves and side gullies act as natural amplifiers, carrying noise in unpredictable directions that often leave listeners disoriented. A sound originating in one narrow canyon could appear miles away, as if drifting from an impossible location. Miners would stop their work attempting to trace the source, only to find the tone shifting along unseen paths. These geographic quirks created confusion and frustration, yet they also contributed to the allure and terror of the phenomenon, making each encounter feel both immediate and inaccessible. The canyon's layout seemed to conspire with the sound, amplifying its impact while keeping its origin hidden. Those who laboured in isolation often spoke of unease, noting that the whistles seemed to respond to their movements or to linger when no one approached. In dimly lit tunnels, the echo of a worker's footstep could be accompanied by a high-pitched tone that would vanish upon investigation, leaving the miner uncertain whether it was wind, machinery, or something else entirely. This interplay between human perception and natural acoustics heightened anxiety and gave the whistles an almost intentional presence. Miners' journals and recollections, where available, emphasized the emotional weight of the sounds, capturing moments of wonder, fear, and speculation without offering resolution. In seeking explanations, contemporary attempts focused on wind, distant travel, or echoes of machinery, yet none satisfied the accounts of multiple observers. Geological surveys noted common air currents and temperature shifts that could distort sound, but these conditions failed to account for the rhythm, pitch, or location reported. Mining supervisors and regional historians recorded the reports with cautious acknowledgement, often dismissing them as imagination or coincidence, but the recurrence across different mines and nights suggested otherwise. Each new account reinforced the notion that the whistles were something outside conventional explanation, something that seemed to belong more to the canyon than to human activity. Surviving letters and brief newspaper mentions suggest that these phantom whistles continued to be heard over the years, extending beyond a single mine or season. A small handful of written records detail the sound's persistence, noting their impact on morale and the eerie conversations they inspired among workers. Even as mining equipment modernized and labor shifted, the phenomenon did not entirely disappear, lingering in the memories of those who had heard it firsthand. The repeated reports create a through line, suggesting that the canyon preserves the pattern of sound in a way that transcends a single observer or single moment in time. Stories passed among miners carried a weight of caution and intrigue, embedding the sounds into the collective memory of the canyon without ever fully explaining them. Oral accounts describe the whistles with reverence and trepidation, portraying them as mysterious companions to the arduous labour. These retellings influenced subsequent miners, fostering both fear and curiosity. Even today, historians note the consistency of these narratives, which underscores how a shared auditory experience can become a living part of local history, existing at the intersection of perception, environment, and the unknown. Even in the present day, the canyon's walls seem to hold their voices, bending and stretching any sound into forms that defy clear interpretation. Modern visitors and researchers occasionally report faint tonal echoes in the same areas once worked by miners, though these are never verified with consistency. The auditory landscape of Glen Canyon remains complex, and while technology allows us to measure and map sound in unprecedented ways, there is still something about the canyon's shape and material that preserves an element of unpredictability. The whistles, real or imagined, endure as a reminder of how human perception interacts with the environment, leaving traces that refuse explanation. Though the mines have been silent for decades, the canyon keeps the memory of those whistles as if it refuses to let them go. The hidden cave dwelling, found by Emery Kolb. The sun struck the canyon walls at a low angle, illuminating crags and hidden ledges that most explorers passed without notice. Emery Kolb, already well acquainted with the rhythms of the Colorado River, had navigated these waters countless times, cataloguing formations and photographing the dramatic cliffs that frame the canyon's interior. On this particular stretch, however, a subtle shadow along a sheer sandstone face caught his attention. It was neither a natural fissure nor the play of light alone. Something about the indentation suggested concealment, as if the canyon had deliberately shielded a small secret from those who passed below. Emery Kolb, navigating the Colorado River with his camera in hand, had already documented numerous rapids, alcoves, and hidden beaches, yet the sight of this fissure prompted a pause. His work as a photographer and river guide had trained him to notice anomalies, but the cave's opening appeared carefully hidden behind overhanging layers of sandstone and accumulated scree. Kolb's meticulous notes and sketches of the canyon rarely included such subtle concealments, yet instinct compelled him to investigate, recognizing the possibility of a space previously overlooked by even the most diligent explorers. A narrow fissure in the cliff caught his attention, partially veiled by shadows and the overhang of layered sandstone, hinting at a concealed space beyond. Kneeling at the river's edge, Kolb examined the entrance with a keen eye, noting that the vertical drop above the river might have discouraged casual investigation. The interior was inaccessible to anyone travelling along the canyon floor without deliberate effort, suggesting that its original occupants had valued both privacy and protection. Even in the early morning light, the cave exuded a quiet secrecy that seemed to absorb the surrounding landscape, holding it apart from the broader canyon world. Stepping closer, Kolb noted the subtle marks of human activity, worn stone, ledges smoothed by touch, and traces that suggested someone had once lived within the shelter of the rock. The surfaces, otherwise rough and jagged, bore faint abrasions that indicated repeated contact over time. Shadows revealed shallow depressions along the floor, perhaps used for sitting or storing small items. Each observation heightened the sense of discovery, emphasizing the contrast between the canyon's vast emptiness and the intimate presence suggested by these human traces. Scattered fragments of pottery and chipstone tools lay among the cave's shallow recesses, offering tantalizing clues about a past life that remained otherwise invisible. Kolb carefully documented each item with his camera, capturing scale and placement without disturbing the fragile arrangement. The artifacts were modest in number but precise in placement, hinting at a temporary or seasonal occupation rather than a permanent settlement. Their existence affirmed that the cave had been a deliberate choice for shelter or refuge, and yet the minimal evidence left more questions than answers, preserving the dwelling's enigma. The terrain made every approach precarious. Loose rock underfoot and vertical drops reminded him that this cave had been difficult to find and likely even harder to inhabit. Kolb's journal notes recount the careful steps he took to reach the opening, measuring each foothold and considering the stability of overhanging rock. The canyon's steep walls and uneven surfaces offered no margin for error, reinforcing the sense that the cave's original occupants had deliberately chosen a location both secluded and defensible. It was a space hidden in plain sight, requiring both skill and determination to access. Kolb paused to consider the purpose of the dwelling, speculating on why its builders had chosen such a remote and hidden location along the river's edge. Was it intended as a temporary refuge, a hunting shelter, or a place to observe the river while remaining unseen? While his notes avoided conjecture beyond what the evidence suggested, the arrangement of ledges, artifacts, and spatial layout indicated careful thought. The cave's position along the water offered a clear view of passing currents, yet the overhanging rock provided concealment from distant eyes, creating an intimate intersection of observation and isolation. From its opening, the cave commanded a strategic view of the surrounding cliffs and the slow-moving river, hinting at both concealment and access to vital resources. Kolb recorded the way the morning light illuminated the interior, revealing patterns on the walls that might have served as reference points or symbolic markings for previous inhabitants. The narrow space echoed faintly with river sounds, carrying the noise in measured intervals that amplified the sense of being suspended between the canyon and the unknown. Every observation reinforced the impression of deliberate placement within a vast, otherwise uninhabited landscape. His camera captured the interplay of light and shadow along the walls, preserving angles and textures that human memory alone might fail to retain. Kolb meticulously photographed each ledge, fragment, and recess, aware that the cave's significance would depend on careful documentation. Even minor details, chips in the stone, discolorations, or subtle grooves, might reveal clues about its use. The resulting images allowed later researchers to verify the dwelling's existence, while the photographs themselves conveyed a quiet eeriness, a space clearly touched by human presence yet largely abandoned to the canyon's enduring silence. The cave's relationship to the larger canyon landscape became evident as Kolb noted seasonal water levels and adjacent alcoves that shaped its accessibility and utility. Rising river currents during spring and summer rendered the approach difficult, while lower flows allowed for closer examination. Nearby overhangs created natural barriers, and the canyon's contour channeled sounds and light in ways that transformed perception within the cave. Kolb's observations emphasized that the dwelling did not exist in isolation. It was part of a larger environmental system that both concealed and defined it, demonstrating a careful integration with its surroundings. After thorough scrutiny, many questions lingered. Who had inhabited the cave, and why had their presence left so few clues behind? Kolb noted the scarcity of artifacts and the absence of long-term constructions, suggesting the dwelling may have served a short-term or episodic purpose. The faint markings on ledges, the occasional pottery shard, and the careful positioning of stones provided hints but no answers. The cave's occupants had left traces subtle enough to challenge detection for decades, a mystery preserved by the canyon's rugged and unyielding terrain. Subsequent explorers and historians would reference Kolb's notes, yet the cave retained an air of inaccessibility and mystery, resisting full understanding even decades later. Modern river runners, archaeologists, and scholars consulted his photographs and journals, attempting to contextualize the dwelling within Grand Canyon history. While the cave's existence is verified, the motivations, identities, and daily routines of its past occupants remain speculative, leaving the space suspended in the liminal territory between history and enigma. To this day, the rock face seems to hold the memory of the cave, echoing the faint traces of those who once found shelter within its hidden chambers. Light, wind, and sound combine within the narrow recess to preserve an atmosphere that feels untouched by time, a place where human presence lingers without intrusion. The interplay of natural concealment, subtle human alteration, and the canyon's imposing scale maintains a sense of both wonder and unease, ensuring that discovery never fully resolves the mystery of who occupied the cave and why. Somewhere along that shadowed wall the cave waits, holding its secrets in the quiet absence of those who once called it home. The disappearance of Glen and Bessie Hyde. The Colorado River surged through narrow canyons, carrying the sound of rushing water against towering cliffs that seemed to swallow all human presence. Spray from the turbulent rapids drifted into the canyon air, catching sunlight in fleeting flashes that danced across jagged walls. Every echo amplified the roar, creating a sense of both awe and unease. Along the river, a small wooden boat appeared as a fragile intrusion against the massive natural expanse. Within this dynamic environment, human effort was fragile, every paddle stroke a negotiation with the river's unpredictable currents and hidden hazards that lurk just beneath the surface. Glen and Bessie Hyde, newly married and eager for adventure, had chosen this stretch of the canyon for its challenge and beauty, unaware of the peril it concealed. Glen, a man of late 20s with prior river experience, had meticulously planned the voyage, while Bessie, only slightly younger, embraced the journey with determination and curiosity. Their goal was not simply to traverse the river, but to document and experience its full scale, blending daring and careful observation. The couple's commitment to each other and their expedition made them cautious but bold, a combination that would later intensify the mystery surrounding their disappearance. Their wooden boat, carefully provisioned and packed for weeks, glided over calmer waters as the couple made steady progress into the depths of the canyon. Supplies included food, blankets, navigational charts, and essential tools, all meticulously secured to prevent loss in the rapids. The boat itself, although suitable for the era, lacked modern stabilization, rendering it vulnerable to even minor river turbulence. Despite meticulous preparation, each paddle stroke brought them closer to areas where the Colorado River transformed from manageable flow to violent swirling currents. The juxtaposition of careful planning against unpredictable natural forces heightened the tension, foreshadowing the challenges yet to come. Early observers noted their passage past familiar landmarks, the sound of oars dipping in rhythm punctuating the canyon's otherwise still air. Guides stationed along sandy banks and at cliff overlooks documented their progress, reporting glimpses of the couple maneuvering skillfully around minor hazards. Birds and desert wildlife moved unnoticed around the boat, emphasizing the isolation of human presence within the canyon's immense scale. These brief encounters, later cited in newspapers and expedition logs, represent the final verifiable traces of the Hyde's journey before the events leading to their disappearance unfolded, leaving the river and cliffs as silent witnesses. As they approached more treacherous sections, subtle signs hinted at the river's unpredictability. Churning currents, hidden rocks, and the narrowing of walls that magnified every sound. The canyon constricted, creating sudden rapids and violent eddies that could easily capsize an unprepared boat. The roar of water was accompanied by sharp echoes that distorted perception, making distances difficult to judge. Even the experienced eye of Glen Hyde could not fully anticipate the river's transformations in this section. Shadows lengthened along walls, and submerged rocks lurked beneath the surface, creating a tension that weighed on every stroke and increased the vulnerability of the small wooden vessel. Ringbolt Rapids, notorious for its sudden drops and turbulent waves, lay ahead, demanding precise navigation that could make or break any expedition. The foaming waters churned around jagged rock formations, creating whirlpools and treacherous currents that required careful timing and precise steering. Contemporary river guides describe the rapid as a series of cascading obstacles, each capable of destabilizing a boat in seconds. In 1928, without modern safety equipment or reliable communication, Even a minor misjudgment could have catastrophic consequences. The roar of the water and spray carried through the narrow walls, isolating the couple and magnifying the danger in ways that few observers could truly grasp. After the passage, when no further contact was made, concern spread among river guides and locals who had tracked their journey with cautious interest. Days passed without any sign of the Hydes, and speculation began to grow. River patrols, camping parties, and nearby settlements exchanged reports and rumours, piecing together the couple's last known positions. Each missing confirmation added weight to the concern, suggesting that something significant had occurred during their navigation of the rapids. The canyon's walls and hidden alcoves amplified both physical and psychological isolation, leaving no easy answers and making the first responders' task exponentially more difficult. Searchers recovered fragments of their boat and personal belongings, scattered and battered, yet no trace of Glen or Bessie was ever found within the canyon. Pieces of wood, paddles and other personal effects were found lodged between rocks or washed ashore along quieter stretches of riverbank. These objects confirmed the couple's presence and indicated violent disruption, yet provided no clue to the fate of the Hydes themselves. The canyon seemed to absorb their disappearance, the currents erasing evidence and preserving only fragments that tantalized those attempting to reconstruct the final moments of their journey. Eyewitness accounts varied, with distant observers reporting glimpses of a boat struggling, while others claimed they saw nothing at all, deepening the mystery. Some river travellers remembered fleeting shadows or movements that might have been the couple's boat, yet conflicting reports left historians with no definitive timeline. The echoes of the canyon distorted perception, creating uncertainty in every observation. These partial sightings, combined with the absence of direct evidence, ensured that the narrative of the Hyde's disappearance remained fragmented, with every recovered item and remembered sound raising more questions than answers. Seasonal currents, fluctuating water levels, and hidden eddies transformed even familiar river sections into treacherous, nearly unpredictable channels. In 1928, spring runoff swelled the Colorado River, increasing its speed and turbulence. Submerged rocks became invisible hazards, while familiar eddies turned violent, complicating navigation. The canyon's geography compounded these dangers. Narrow walls, deep pools, and sudden drops left little margin for error. Even minor miscalculations could result in the loss of a boat or its occupants. These environmental factors contextualize why the Hyde's disappearance was not simply a matter of human error, but an interaction with an untamed and formidable natural system. Organized searches relied on rowboats, scouting parties, and later, aerial surveys, yet the canyon's immense scale and rugged terrain thwarted every attempt at clarity. Rescue parties combed miles of cliffs, beaches, and river channels, documenting every detail and searching every feasible nook and alcove. Despite these efforts, the couple remained absent. The canyon's vastness created logistical challenges. Even the most experienced searchers could not cover every ledge or rapid, and the swift-moving waters could carry evidence far downstream. The persistence of failure reinforced the canyon's capacity to conceal events that might otherwise have been understood with certainty. From old logs and journals, historians and river enthusiasts still study the records, examining what is known while acknowledging the impossibility of drawing firm conclusions. Analysis of eyewitness accounts, recovered fragments, and environmental data allows for speculation about possible scenarios, yet none can provide certainty. The story of Glen and Bessie Hyde has become part of Grand Canyon lore, a cautionary tale for river runners and explorers alike. Even modern equipment, aerial photography, and scientific study have failed to illuminate the precise sequence of events, ensuring the disappearance remains a haunting enigma. The canyon, silent and imposing, seems to carry the memory of that fateful voyage, reminding all who enter of the river's untamed power. Its towering walls, rushing water, and hidden eddies preserve the impression of a couple who once dared to navigate its expanse and vanished without a trace. The interplay of water, rock, and human endeavour holds the story in suspension, leaving only fragments, echoes, and unanswered questions to mark their passage. The Colorado River flows with history in its currents, yet some chapters remain unwritten, whispered only in the roar of the rapids. The river flows on, carrying its memory of the Hydes, yet the canyon guards the truth of what became of them with relentless silence. The 1971 crash debris that didn't match any missing aircraft. A lone hiker navigating a seldom-used trail noticed glinting fragments of metal partially buried in sand and dust, objects that made no sense against the records of flights over the Grand Canyon. At first, the glint seemed like ordinary litter, remnants of forgotten gear, yet closer inspection revealed carefully constructed pieces with rivets, angled struts, and sheets of material inconsistent with hiking equipment. The hiker, familiar with aircraft from previous trips along nearby routes, realized that these fragments appeared to originate from some type of aerial vehicle. The discovery was reported to local authorities, setting in motion a chain of investigation that would reveal layers of anomaly without explanation. The pieces were scattered across ledges and hidden pockets, some twisted from force, others flat and sharply bent, indicating an event far beyond ordinary wear. Small panels were marked with paint that had partially eroded but displayed unusual layering, suggesting a controlled manufacture rather than accidental debris. Nearby, tubular supports appeared sheared, yet not in a pattern typical of conventional aircraft failures. Their placement in the canyon suggested movement over time, but gravity and wind alone could not account for the careful dispersion across ledges and small alcoves. Each fragment's presence challenged the investigators' assumptions about known aviation accidents in the area. Local rangers were alerted, and careful documentation began, capturing photographs, precise measurements, and notes on the orientation and spacing of each fragment. Mapping the debris required ropes, ladders, and long hours on unstable surfaces, with each observation recorded to create a comprehensive picture. Rangers coordinated with aviation officials, providing sketches and field notes to experts hundreds of miles away. Even preliminary assessments raised questions. The materials did not match specifications for any aircraft that had flown over the Grand Canyon or crashed in the region, a contradiction that would become central to the mystery. Investigators quickly realized that the debris did not correspond to any reported aircraft losses in the region, leaving an unexplained gap into aviation records. Air traffic logs, accident reports, and federal aviation files revealed no missing planes in 1971 whose wreckage could match the fragments. Yet the composition, size, and construction details indicated aerospace origin, creating an unresolved puzzle for authorities. Each report and measurement fed into a growing narrative of ambiguity, where physical evidence existed but historical documentation could not account for it. The canyon, isolated and vast, became a stage for this unexplained anomaly. Sheets of aluminum and sections of fuselage-like tubing displayed construction methods that suggested air travel, yet experts could not link them to any known model. Rivet patterns, panel designs, and fastener types were inconsistent with commercial aircraft, military planes, or even private experimental craft documented in the 1970s. Specialists compared these fragments to archived schematics from manufacturers, but no match was found. The strange congruity of the pieces, metal of precise engineering yet untraceable, left the possibility of an unknown or unrecorded flight open, but no further clues appeared in official sources. Hikers and guides who passed the area later described unusual reflections of sunlight, catching on the edges of the fragments in ways that hinted at their unusual positioning. Some reported a glinting object tucked behind a rocky ledge that seemed improbable to reach without climbing equipment, while others noted metallic sounds when loose fragments shifted underfoot. These minor observations, though anecdotal, reinforced the idea that the debris was neither random nor entirely natural. The canyon's isolation amplified perception, turning small metallic reflections into a focal point for curiosity and speculation. Retrieval efforts required careful climbing, ropes, and improvised scaffolding as the fragments rested in difficult-to-reach crevices and steep inclines. Teams worked methodically, securing each piece and photographing its surroundings before extraction. Despite extreme care, some fragments were damaged during recovery, though their essential characteristics remained intact. Every climb and retrieval added tension. The canyon's steep walls and hidden drops created an ever-present risk, reminding investigators that nature could alter or erase evidence as effectively as human hands. Aviation specialists examined the materials, considering possibilities such as experimental aircraft, misreported crashes, or training equipment, but none fit the documented facts. Federal and private aviation experts were consulted to analyze metallurgy, fasteners, and panel construction. Even the hypothesis of experimental or one-off designs could not fully explain the combination of size, construction, and location. The inability to reconcile evidence with known records produced an enduring professional curiosity, prompting repeated reviews of files, schematics, and local accounts over subsequent decades. Close inspection revealed inconsistencies in rivet patterns, paint layers, and alloy composition that further complicated identification, suggesting an origin unknown to investigators. While some components resembled familiar aircraft materials, the inconsistencies were enough to rule out conventional explanations. Paint layers included a mixture of industrial coatings inconsistent with standard aerospace practices of the period, and the rivet patterns did not align with either commercial or military specifications. These anomalies created a tangible, verifiable mystery that even modern forensic methods could not resolve completely. Forensic analysis of corrosion and paint erosion on several fragments revealed exposure patterns inconsistent with standard environmental wear, suggesting they may have been in storage or transported before arriving at the canyon. Metallurgists examined oxidation, chipping, and heat marks, noting unusual combinations of weathering and abrasion. Some panels appeared scratched in a manner consistent with handling rather than accidental impact from a crash, and certain coatings were resistant to the river's acidic water, unlike most aircraft materials of the era. These findings prompted questions about the chain of custody for the debris before discovery, hinting at possibilities of human interference or unusual movement, without implying anything speculative beyond documented physical characteristics. This additional layer of observation underscored why the debris remained untraceable in aviation records. Media coverage and historical accounts recorded the anomaly, presenting the facts while noting the absence of explanation or corroborating evidence. Newspapers and aviation journals of the early 1970s reported on the discovery cautiously, citing rangers and local authorities, yet emphasizing that no missing aircraft matched the fragments. Articles highlighted both the mystery and the extensive official searches while preserving the factual foundation of the incident. Readers and aviation enthusiasts alike were drawn to the story, contributing to the longevity of the case in local and historical consciousness. In examining wind, erosion, and river currents as possible factors in debris placement, attempts proved inconclusive, leaving questions about how the pieces arrived where they were found. Geological and hydrological studies indicated that seasonal winds could move small, lightweight materials short distances, but the heavier panels and tubular sections could not have reached certain ledges without intervention. The combination of topography, sheer cliffs, and isolation suggested that either unknown forces or an unrecorded event had placed the debris, reinforcing the sense of a mystery resistant to conventional explanation. Surrounded by old flight logs and photographs, enthusiasts and historians continue to review records, hoping to reconcile the debris with a known flight, yet the mystery endures. Archival investigations combined with field surveys have produced detailed maps and digital recreations of fragment locations. Still, every attempt to match the debris with flight registries or accident files results in dead ends. The fragments stand as evidence of a historical anomaly, their origin unresolved despite exhaustive research, and they continue to inspire curiosity and caution for those navigating the canyon. Amid dusty archives and faded photographs, the fragments sit quietly, silent witnesses to an event that has never been fully understood. They occupy a strange space between verifiable physical evidence and unresolved historical enigma, bridging human observation with nature's unyielding concealment. The unusual characteristics of the debris, combined with the canyon's isolation and inaccessibility, ensure that the story remains open-ended. It serves as a reminder that even in an era of documentation and records, some events defy explanation, leaving the past suspended in quiet uncertainty. Though time passes and reports accumulate, the canyon guards the origin of that debris, allowing only speculation to hover in its unexplained wake. The Kincaid Cavern Controversy. In 1924, explorers first documented Kincaid Cavern, a shadowed hollow carved into the canyon walls, where unusual artifacts hinted at human activity long before official records suggested. Early notes described the cavern as a place of quiet isolation, its entrance nearly concealed by rock and brush. Those who entered reported a chilling stillness, interrupted only by the scrape of boots on stone. Inside, they encountered fragments of pottery, stone tools, and other items that did not seem to fit the known chronology of the region. Initial photographs and sketches captured these objects, but the cavern's inaccessibility left many questions unresolved, fostering an early aura of secrecy and intrigue. Initial reports described stone tools, pottery fragments, and faint carvings along the cavern's interior, provoking both curiosity and skepticism among early field investigators. Explorers noted that some pottery shards exhibited unusual shapes, suggesting techniques unfamiliar to contemporary archaeologists. Stone implements showed wear patterns inconsistent with nearby known settlements. Even the simplest objects seemed to contradict assumptions about prehistoric activity in this section of the Grand Canyon. While some researchers believed these findings were misinterpretations, others insisted on careful documentation, emphasizing that even small anomalies could reshape understanding of human presence and technological development in the canyon's remote recesses. Archaeologists who examined the site noted the precision of certain markings, contrasting sharply with other artifacts believed to belong to the same period, creating immediate questions about chronological consistency. Carvings etched into the cavern walls depicted geometric patterns that bore no clear resemblance to known Native American motifs in the region. Measurements and sketches highlighted symmetry and repetition, suggesting intentional design. The juxtaposition of these carvings with more rudimentary stone tools left scholars debating whether multiple cultural layers existed or if some artifacts were misplaced. The discrepancy fueled tension between advocates of conventional history and those open to more speculative interpretations grounded in physical evidence. Measurements of carved niches and artifact placement revealed patterns that did not align with the conventional understanding of prehistoric habitation, leaving experts divided on their origin. Certain alcoves appeared purposefully shaped to hold objects, though no signs of permanent living arrangements were apparent. Artifacts within these niches suggested ceremonial or symbolic use, raising further questions about the people who created them. Researchers documented dimensions, angles, and spacing meticulously, yet no comparable sites were known nearby. The challenge of reconciling these details with established timelines created a persistent tension between empirical observation and historical interpretation, leaving Kincaid Cavern as an enigmatic anomaly in the archaeological record. Access to the cavern was tightly controlled by private landowners and park authorities, limiting repeated study and fueling debate over whether evidence had been intentionally withheld. Permission to enter required formal applications, and only small teams could explore at a time. Restricted access hampered continuous observation and detailed recording, increasing speculation about what might lie beyond the visible areas. Some researchers suggested that private concerns, safety risks, and preservation policies unintentionally contributed to secrecy, yet the combination of inaccessibility and incomplete documentation intensified public fascination. This limitation created an environment where rumour and partial observation filled gaps left by factual reporting, heightening the cavern's mysterious reputation. From the journals of early explorers, eyewitness accounts conflicted over the presence of certain objects, with journals describing items that others failed to locate, deepening uncertainty. One diary mentioned a small carved effigy near a side passage, while later teams reported only broken fragments and scattered stones in the same location. The inconsistency raised questions about natural displacement versus subjective memory. Researchers compared sketches and photographs with modern surveys, noting subtle differences in artifact placement and orientation. These discrepancies, though minor in some cases, accumulated into a broader pattern of ambiguity, ensuring that even careful documentation left unresolved threads for future investigators to untangle. The cavern's jagged interior, narrow passages, and treacherous ledges posed logistical challenges that restricted detailed investigation and made long-term preservation difficult. Teams had to navigate steep rock faces, slippery surfaces, and low-hanging stalactites while carefully handling delicate artifacts. Even small errors in movement risked damaging the very evidence under study. Environmental conditions, dust, humidity and temperature fluctuations affected the preservation of pottery and carvings, complicating analysis. These physical obstacles ensured that every observation required meticulous effort, and they amplified the sense that the canyon itself acted as a guardian of hidden knowledge, allowing only the most determined and cautious explorers to glimpse its secrets. Theories regarding the artifact's origins range from early Native American activity to previously unknown ancient cultures, yet each interpretation left gaps that could not be reconciled. Some suggested the cavern might have been a ceremonial site rather than a settlement, explaining unusual placements and carvings. Others considered whether items had been relocated through natural events, though evidence for such movement was limited. Comparisons with other archaeological finds revealed partial similarities but no direct matches. Scholars debated whether the anomalies indicated a lost culture, a misattribution of artifacts, or incomplete records, ensuring that Kincaid Cavern remained a subject of intense scrutiny and speculative analysis for decades. Later surveys attempted to catalogue the cavern comprehensively, documenting broken pottery, stone tools, and unusual markings, yet inconsistencies persisted between teams and seasons. Measurements varied slightly, and some objects reported in early notes could not be located. Researchers developed detailed site maps and created inventories, cross-referencing findings with historical records. Despite technological improvements, certain carvings and artifact placements resisted clear interpretation. Each expedition, rather than resolving uncertainties, added new layers of observation that complicated the narrative, maintaining a sense of mystery and leaving open the possibility that additional discoveries might radically alter current understanding. Public and scholarly reactions were cautious but fascinated, with articles and lectures noting the tantalizing possibility of a hidden chapter in Grand Canyon history, though definitive conclusions remained elusive. Coverage highlighted both the meticulous documentation and the remaining ambiguities, emphasizing the contrast between careful observation and interpretive gaps. Scholars presented their findings at conferences, inviting debate over cultural attribution, chronology, and meaning. Meanwhile, public interest grew, with readers intrigued by the notion of a cavern that defied conventional historical timelines. The tension between documented evidence and enduring uncertainty reinforced Kincaid Cavern's reputation as a site of unresolved intrigue. After careful investigation, several carvings and artifact placements defied logical explanation, hinting at deliberate arrangement or techniques not yet fully understood. Some niches seemed perfectly aligned to catch light or shadow, while certain objects appeared positioned to suggest symbolic meaning. Analytical reports documented angles, symmetry, and spacing, noting that even subtle patterns could carry significance. While no concrete conclusions could be drawn, these anomalies reinforced the notion that human intent, rather than chance, shaped aspects of the cavern. The persistent questions raised by these observations contributed to a broader sense of mystery surrounding the site and the people who once inhabited it. Modern researchers continue to revisit Kincaid Cavern, employing updated archaeological methods and non-invasive scanning technology, yet the site maintains an air of unresolved mystery. Ground-penetrating radar, 3D mapping, and advanced material analysis have expanded understanding of the cavern's layout and preserved artifacts, yet the findings have yielded few definitive answers. Each layer of observation confirms both the presence of human activity and the limits of interpretation. New expeditions underscore that Kincaid Cavern continues to challenge conventional timelines and theoretical frameworks, leaving its true story incomplete despite decades of methodical investigation. The cavern seems to preserve its secrets within every crevice and shadow, leaving each new observation to raise further questions rather than provide answers. Even with modern techniques, subtle inconsistencies in artifact placement and environmental clues resist easy explanation. Researchers and enthusiasts alike find themselves confronting a paradox. The more data collected, the deeper the canyon's enigma appears. The interplay of meticulous documentation and persistent uncertainty ensures that Kincaid Cavern retains its reputation as a site of both historical significance and enduring mystery, inviting inquiry without offering closure. Over the years, Kincaid Cavern has guarded its secrets behind stone and shadow, leaving only unanswered questions for those who dare to enter. The strange footprints on the North Rim Plateau. On a crisp morning in late spring, hikers stumbled across a series of deep impressions stretching across the North Rim Plateau, unlike any tracks they had previously encountered. The plateau's sparse soil, rocky outcrops, and abrupt elevation changes made the sighting all the more striking. Each print was sharply defined, pressed into the clay-like surface in a manner that suggested considerable weight. Observers noted that the impressions were evenly spaced, forming a continuous line across a ridge that appeared otherwise untouched. For reasons that remain unclear, no sounds or disturbances accompanied the hikers' approach, creating a quiet tension as the trail led them deeper into the plateau's isolated expanse. The initial observers measured the prints carefully, noting their unusual length, width, and pronounced arches, recording details that would later perplex both scientists and park officials. Using standard measuring tools, they captured every dimension and angle, comparing them to local animal tracks and known human gait patterns. Photographs documented not only the shape but also the depth, showing unexpected pressure points that implied unusual weight distribution. Notes indicated that the stride length exceeded that of an average adult, yet no accompanying evidence, scattered clothing, equipment, or other human traces was present. These precise observations became the first verifiable records of a phenomenon that defied immediate explanation. The surrounding terrain revealed rocky soil interspersed with hardy grasses and occasional juniper shrubs, a plateau that should have preserved ordinary tracks but seemed to accentuate these strange impressions. Small stones embedded in the ground bore subtle scratches aligned with the footprints, suggesting contact with unusually hard surfaces. Observers remarked on the pristine condition of the prints despite wind gusts, inconsistent with natural erosion over time. The combination of firm impressions in a dry, porous soil and the plateau's exposure to elements made the clarity of the tracks particularly puzzling, challenging any immediate geological or environmental explanation. Detailed sketches and photographs were taken, showing consistent stride patterns and spacing that suggested deliberate movement across the plateau, rather than random displacement. Each footprint appeared oriented in a singular direction, following a line that occasionally curved to navigate uneven terrain. The impressions maintained proportional depth and pressure, indicating weight remained consistent across the path. Some prints showed subtle depressions in areas corresponding to the ball of the foot and heel, while others contained small cracks suggesting firm contact with the soil. The data recorded by observers became the foundation for subsequent investigations and emphasized the difficulty of attributing the tracks to known phenomena. Comparisons with local wildlife tracks, elk, mountain lion, coyote, quickly ruled out familiar animals, while human footprints of similar size failed to match the depth and formation observed. Footprints of elk or deer, for example, were narrower, often paired or clustered, and lacked the elongated arch present in these impressions. Mountain lion or coyote tracks, though predatory, were asymmetrical and rarely exhibited consistent stride patterns over such distances. Human shoe prints could replicate length but not weight distribution or depth, leaving researchers puzzled. Each comparison reinforced the conclusion that the prints were neither ordinary animal tracks nor typical human impressions. Rangers and additional hikers who visited the site reported seeing impressions that aligned perfectly over long stretches, as though a solitary figure had walked in complete silence across the rim. Subsequent expeditions confirmed the continuity of the line, noting that no shortcuts or deviations occurred despite variations in terrain. Observers described an eerie quality. The prints appeared deliberate, yet left no other evidence of presence, such as broken branches, disturbed vegetation, or debris. This unusual consistency suggested an unexplained force or technique at work, heightening the sense that the North Rim Plateau had become a canvas for something both deliberate and enigmatic. Inspection of the site revealed subtle disturbances in the surrounding soil and small tufts of grass, bent outward, indicating that the prints had been made without the disruption typical of ordinary footfalls. Fine details indicated that weight was applied gradually and evenly, with no signs of slipping or dragging. Some impressions even contained faint ridges as though toes or claws had left impressions, yet they did not match the anatomy of known species. These small anomalies became crucial in determining that whatever made the prints exert pressure in an unfamiliar and methodical way, reinforcing the observation that the tracks resisted simple explanation. Using known methods and stride replication, attempts to retrace the steps yielded only shallow or inconsistent marks, leaving the origin of the tracks unexplained. Park officials and field researchers conducted controlled tests, walking barefoot in boots and even using weighted replicas to simulate impressions. None produced results resembling the original prints. Tools designed to measure soil compaction confirmed that the original tracks reflected weight and balance inconsistent with standard human locomotion. These failed replications deepen the mystery, demonstrating that neither human nor animal activity could account for the patterns recorded across the plateau. Biologists and geologists who later inspected the prints confirmed the anomalies, noting that the soil compaction and weight distribution did not correspond to any known species or human pattern. The experts analysed soil density, moisture content, and footprint depth, revealing uniform pressure applied across unusually wide soles. Weathered areas adjacent to the tracks showed no evidence of erosion that would typically occur with age, suggesting the impressions were relatively recent yet persistent. These observations formed the basis for formal reports, highlighting a verified phenomenon that resisted classification within conventional natural history. Echoes of past explorers hint at unexplained tracks on the North Rim, though none matched descriptions or offered verified documentation. Rangers' logs from the 1930s and 1950s contained brief references to large, unusual prints, often dismissed at the time as exaggeration. Yet the similarities in stride, spacing, and isolated location created a tenuous continuity that connected multiple reports across decades. These records, while sparse, suggested a recurring enigma within the plateau, a pattern of impressions that persisted in memory and occasionally in observation, reinforcing the idea that the prints were part of a long-standing and unresolved phenomenon. As the weather shifted and rain began to erode parts of the plateau, some prints vanished entirely, while others persisted, their origins and purpose remaining stubbornly opaque. Field notes documented variations in visibility, indicating that environmental conditions influenced preservation yet could not fully explain formation. Researchers noted that even under rain and wind, certain tracks retained crisp edges and depth, defying typical sedimentary expectations. This persistence underscored the challenge of analysing the prints, blending natural forces with unexplained characteristics in ways that complicated entities attempt at definitive interpretation. With the aid of GPS mapping and digital imaging, modern surveys have sought to preserve a detailed record, but each effort only reinforces the enduring mystery rather than offering a definitive explanation. High-resolution images captured micro-details, while topographical mapping traced the exact trajectory over the plateau. Despite these technological advances, no source or replicable method for creating the impressions was discovered. The combination of advanced documentation with continued ambiguity emphasized that the tracks remain an unsolved element of Grand Canyon observation, blending verifiable evidence with inexplicable origin in a manner that continues to intrigue professionals and amateurs alike. Even the most meticulous documentation cannot explain the silent trail left behind, and the footprints continue to invite speculation without revealing a single truth. Observers and scientists alike are left to confront the paradox. Each new investigation adds clarity to certain features yet only deepens uncertainty regarding origin, movement, and purpose. The plateau retains its quiet authority, indifferent to attempts at explanation, and the footprints linger as a reminder that not all evidence can be neatly categorized. Their presence provokes reflection, curiosity, and the awareness that some mysteries resist resolution, even under the scrutiny of careful documentation. Fading into the dust of the North Rim Plateau, the footprints leave behind a question that refuses to be answered. The 1990 lost tourist who returned with missing hours. A solitary figure disappeared along the winding cliffs of the South Rim Trail, leaving behind only scattered footprints that seemed to end abruptly on the rocky path. Observers noted the precise and careful way the footprints had been made, pressed deeply into the worn soil as though the individual had walked with measured steps. Despite the clear weather and visibility that day, the path appeared undisturbed beyond the last impressions, suggesting a sudden vanishing rather than a gradual straying. Those who noticed the absence immediately sensed something was amiss, the silence of the canyon amplifying the missing presence as search parties prepared to intervene. Park rangers launched an immediate search, combing narrow ledges and steep inclines that often proved treacherous even for experienced hikers. Teams moved quickly along designated trails, calling out for any signs of life and scanning cliffsides for shadowy shapes. Helicopters hovered above, while ground teams methodically checked ledges, overhangs, and side paths that could conceal a lost or injured traveller. The combination of vertical terrain, loose rocks, and sheer drops made each sweep perilous, requiring coordination, patience, and careful attention to detail. Even minor oversights could allow a hiker to remain undetected, a fact that added weight to the growing concern. The canyon's labyrinth of plateaus and sudden drop-offs created natural obstacles that complicated every attempt to locate the missing tourist. Navigating switchbacks and unmarked trails slowed searchers, while hidden gullies and shadowed alcoves obscured even the most obvious vantage points. Weather patterns shifted rapidly, with gusts of wind stirring dust and leaves, further masking footprints and small clues. Rangers relied on prior maps, GPS devices, and long experience, yet the canyon's sheer complexity often defied precise prediction. The terrain's inherent dangers compounded the mystery, emphasizing the difficulty of reconciling the tourist disappearance with the seemingly straightforward route they had intended to follow. Hikers who had crossed paths with the individual earlier recalled their confident stride and small pack, though none saw what happened afterward. Conversations, later recorded by rangers, detailed a brisk pace, casual conversation, and even laughter at one point, suggesting an ordinary excursion. No unusual behaviour, hesitation, or signs of distress had been observed, making the sudden disappearance all the more perplexing. Witness accounts highlighted the ordinary nature of the tourist's journey, leaving investigators to grapple with the contrast between normal departure and inexplicable absence. Even the most routine details acquired significance, marking them as points of reference for an otherwise untraceable sequence of hours. Teams documented each sector of the search meticulously, employing maps, radios, and helicopters, yet no trace of the lost tourist emerged in the first crucial hours. Logs recorded every area checked, from well-trodden paths to hidden crevices, but nothing indicated human presence. The absence of discarded gear, clothing, or signs of struggle deepened the sense of mystery, suggesting a disappearance that defied conventional understanding. Weather reports confirmed clear skies, ruling out sudden storms as a complicating factor. Each documented sweep reinforced a growing realization. The tourist's movements during this interval remained entirely unknown, creating an investigative void that both frustrated and intrigued authorities. When the tourist finally returned near a familiar trailhead, companions noticed an unusual disorientation and weariness that did not correspond to the brief duration of absence. Their clothing bore minor dust and scuff marks, yet no injuries serious enough to explain the hours-long disappearance. Observers noted confusion in speech and a struggle to reconcile elapsed time with remembered events. Attempts to recount the missing hours produced fragmented statements, inconsistencies, and long pauses, leaving companions and rangers alike uncertain how to interpret the experience. The sudden reappearance, while relieving immediate fears for safety, introduced a far deeper puzzle: the temporal gap that had occurred within a relatively small, well-known section of the canyon. Official records later revealed a perplexing gap of nearly 6 hours, a period the tourists could not account for, during which their movements remained a mystery. Verification of check-in times, ranger logs, and helicopter observations confirmed the interval, creating a documented discrepancy. Attempts to reconstruct the tourist route with GPS and photography only highlighted inconsistencies between known terrain traversal and elapsed time. Even careful cross-referencing with companion statements failed to bridge the gap, producing a clear and unexplained anomaly. The 6 missing hours became the central focus of investigators, emphasizing both the challenge of the case and the canyon's capacity to conceal events from the scrutiny of modern oversight. Medical evaluations and interviews revealed confusion and fragmented memories, yet no physical explanation could reconcile the missing time with the terrain traversed. Neurologists and park medical staff observed normal cognitive and physical functions, discounting trauma or illness as causes. Descriptions from the tourists included vague recollections of shadowed corridors, faint echoes, and a distorted sense of direction, though no consistent landmarks could be verified. Investigators noted the psychological effects of sudden disappearance and reappearance, but even these offered no definitive explanation. The mismatch between objective records and subjective experience became a defining characteristic of the case, reinforcing its classification as a temporal mystery within the canyon. Investigators retraced the route, observing natural hazards and minor trails, but none offered a plausible explanation for the uninterrupted 6-hour disappearance. Scrutinized areas included hidden alcoves, minor stream beds, and rocky outcrops that could obscure a person temporarily. Even with modern climbing equipment and aerial observations, investigators found no spaces sufficient to account for continuous concealment over multiple hours. Environmental hazards, while present, could not explain the tourist's survival or sudden reemergence in a precise location. Each retracing attempt highlighted the canyon's complex geography, illustrating how even a seemingly short path can conceal anomalies in human perception and record-keeping. Past reports hinted at unusual temporal gaps in the canyon, but none were as clearly documented or as widely witnessed as this 1990 incident. Records from rangers and historical anecdotal accounts described hikers who reappeared unexpectedly or minor delays that exceeded expectations. These previous cases lacked precise verification, whereas the 1990 disappearance provided corroborated timestamps, multiple observers, and thorough documentation. Comparative study underscored both the rarity and the credibility of the event, situating it within the context of other unexplained temporal anomalies in Grand Canyon history, without resorting to speculation or unverified details. The unanswered questions lingered long after the tourists' return, leaving authorities, companions, and observers to confront the inexplicable loss of time. Investigators attempted multiple reconstructions of possible routes, environmental simulations, and timeline analyses, but each produced inconsistencies. Witnesses recalled only brief fragments of conversation and movement, leaving investigators to fill gaps with context rather than evidence. The combination of precise documentation and unaccountable experience created a paradox. Every verifiable fact pointed to a small, familiar section of the canyon, yet the tourists' experience suggested a far larger unknown span of events. In the quiet study of past reports, investigators continue to examine the case files, photographs, and accounts, yet each review reinforces the enduring mystery. Academic papers and park reports note the incident as an anomalous example of time loss within a natural environment. Field guides occasionally reference the case in the context of visitor safety, but without a definitive explanation. Modern technological tools, including GPS and digital mapping, have preserved details for ongoing study, allowing future investigators to analyze the event while leaving the essential enigma intact. The canyon itself, unchanged by human scrutiny, maintains its quiet authority over the truth of those vanished hours. Silent and immense, the Grand Canyon seems to hold the memory of vanished hours as if the landscape itself conspires to obscure them. Visitors traverse the same cliffs and trails, unaware that the canyon has been the site of moments that defy ordinary understanding. Each shadowed alcove, each sudden drop, becomes a reminder of the human experience of time within a vast, indifferent natural world. The tourist disappearance and reappearance endure as a documented event that challenges both perception and chronology, a quiet testament to the canyon's capacity to conceal events beyond explanation. The hours that vanished remain as silent and untraceable as the canyon walls themselves. The whispering tunnels beneath Phantom Ranch. Beneath the sunlit plateau of Phantom Ranch, narrow tunnels twist into shadowed recesses where echoes seem to take on a life of their own. What appear at first as ordinary service corridors reveal subtle peculiarities to those who venture inside, the stone walls and low ceilings amplifying even the smallest sound. Hikers and staff who explore the passages report an immediate shift in atmosphere. The air feels heavier, the temperature slightly cooler, and the usual canyon noises reduced to distant murmurs. Within these corridors, ordinary sounds become distorted, and faint whispers seem to emerge from nowhere, brushing against the edges of perception like a presence just out of reach. Visitors report hearing faint whispers carried along the stone corridors, voices that vanish when approached yet linger in memory long after leaving the tunnels. Accounts describe words that are never fully clear, syllables that echo unpredictably, and the sensation that someone, or something, is listening from just beyond the bend. These experiences are rarely frightening in a conventional sense, but leave a lingering disquiet, a subtle awareness of human perception being challenged. Multiple hikers over several decades have independently described similar auditory phenomena, adding weight to reports that might otherwise have been dismissed as imagination or fatigue. The tunnels themselves date back decades, originally constructed to house utility lines and maintenance pathways, providing a verifiable backdrop to the unexplained phenomena. Historical records show the excavation occurred in stages, accommodating water, power and sewage systems for Phantom Ranch. The tunnels were never intended for recreational use, and their existence remained largely unnoticed by visitors for years. This practical purpose contrasts sharply with the mysterious auditory experiences reported, creating a tension between the ordinary function of the tunnels and the extraordinary perceptions associated with them. Acoustic anomalies within the tunnels create a haunting resonance, amplifying minor sounds and producing auditory effects that challenge conventional explanation. Small echoes, caused by irregular rock surfaces and narrow passageways, can transform ordinary footsteps or dripping water into elongated, whisper-like sounds. Researchers have noted that certain bends in the tunnels carry sound in unexpected ways, producing reverberations that seem to originate from impossible locations. While these physical properties provide partial insight, they do not fully account for the distinctiveness and consistency of the whispers, which appear to communicate subtle patterns without forming coherent speech. Rangers stationed at Phantom Ranch have logged recurring reports of whispers during quiet hours, noting patterns that suggest neither wind nor wildlife fully accounts for the phenomenon. Observations indicate that the whispers often occur in the late afternoon and early evening, times when the canyon's air pressure and temperature fluctuate subtly. Staff reports describe sounds that precede visual movement or coincide with the approach of hikers, as though responding to human presence. The persistence of these occurrences, recorded over years, has prompted internal discussions about how to classify the phenomenon within official park documentation. Researchers and staff have explored possible causes, from shifting air currents to structural reverberation, yet none have conclusively explained the persistence of the voices. Experiments with sound meters, airflow analysis and recording devices produce inconsistent data, sometimes detecting faint signals and other times nothing at all. The variability suggests that even minor environmental changes, temperature, humidity, wind direction, can alter auditory perception in ways that remain difficult to predict. Despite the inconclusive results, the tunnels retain a reputation among visitors and staff alike for carrying a sound that seems unusually intentional. Hikers who venture into the tunnels describe the sensation of being observed, coupled with faint fragmentary phrases that seem almost intelligible but remain elusive. Some recall hearing their own names whispered or phrases resembling conversation, while others report abstract syllables that vanish when they try to focus on them. The experiences often leave individuals hesitant to speak of them, concerned about skepticism, yet their consistent nature across multiple accounts makes complete dismissal difficult. This mixture of ambiguity and repetition forms the heart of the tunnel's enduring mystery, blending human psychology with the environment in a manner that resists clear explanation. With microphones set across the cavern, attempts to record the whispers yield inconsistent results, highlighting the difficulty of capturing a phenomenon that may exist at the edge of perception. Microphones positioned in multiple locations sometimes pick up faint, indeterminate sounds, while at other times the same positions yield nothing. Some researchers theorize that the effect may depend on a combination of the listener's location, the tunnel's geometry, and environmental factors beyond simple measurement. Regardless of these technical attempts, the essence of the whispers, persistent, subtle, and evocative, remains largely intangible, challenging empirical observation. Some investigations have noted that the tunnel's stone composition, primarily kaibab limestone interspersed with pockets of sandstone, may create unusual vibrational patterns when air passes through narrow crevices. These geological features, combined with slight shifts in temperature and humidity, can amplify subtle sounds, producing echoes that mimic human speech or whispers. Acoustic engineers who have briefly examined the tunnels confirm that certain bends and junctions naturally focus sound waves in ways that might explain why the phenomenon is often more pronounced in specific areas. Yet, the precise alignment of rock, air, and environmental conditions required remains difficult to replicate, leaving much of the mystery intact. Time has done little to change the pattern. The echoes return with a curious regularity, defying expectations and leaving a trail of unanswered questions for both casual visitors and investigators. Seasonal variations in canyon climate do not appear to diminish the phenomenon, and the phenomenon is reported across multiple entrances and tunnel branches. Observers describe it as cyclical yet unpredictable, appearing when least expected and fading without warning. This rhythm reinforces the perception that the tunnels themselves are somehow involved, shaping sound and space in a way that seems deliberate without revealing a discernible source. Folklore and psychological factors may shape how individuals experience the tunnels, but documented accounts consistently note sounds that occur without a visible cause. Local guides occasionally reference the whispers in storytelling, drawing on earlier reports to enhance the canyon's mystique, yet the underlying accounts remain factual, unaccounted sounds detected by multiple observers. Even skeptics acknowledge the consistency and persistence of the reports, noting that while human expectation may enhance perception, it cannot account for the documented auditory anomalies captured by multiple independent visitors over decades. The mystery continues to attract attention from researchers and visitors alike, each drawn by the interplay of shadow, stone, and sound that defines the tunnel's reputation. Small groups of hikers intentionally explore the tunnels at quiet times to experience the whispers, recording their observations for study or curiosity. Guides sometimes point out locations most likely to produce the effect, although the phenomenon is never guaranteed. Each exploration reinforces both fascination and unease, illustrating how natural environments can intersect with human perception to produce phenomena that defy simple explanation. Even as sunlight washes over the canyon above, the darkness below preserves the sense that the tunnels harbour secrets, audible yet intangible, just beyond reach. The contrast between the bright open trails above and the shadowed echoing passages below heightens the surreal quality of the whispers. Visitors leave with the impression that the tunnels themselves remember voices and footsteps, that some aspect of the subterranean environment maintains traces of sound and presence that ordinary measurement cannot capture. This tension between light and shadow, known and unknown, ensures the tunnel's mystery endures. Each exploration concludes with the same unsettling awareness. The tunnels are alive with whispers that are neither fabricated nor fully explainable. Some visitors describe the echoes fading as they depart, only to return in memory with equal clarity, lingering long after the physical experience ends. The persistence of these auditory traces defies easy categorization, remaining an open question for both casual explorers and professional researchers. In this way, the tunnels beneath Phantom Ranch continue to exist at the intersection of environment, perception, and unexplained phenomena. Under the glow of the canyon's rim, the tunnels hold voices that belong to no one, yet seem unwilling to be forgotten. The Vanished River Research Team of 1984. Equipment was carefully packed into rafts, each instrument meticulously calibrated for the precise measurements the researchers intended to collect along the Colorado River. Rafts were lashed with ropes, water sampling devices secured, and waterproof notebooks stacked neatly to withstand the river's unpredictable flow. The team moved with a quiet intensity, aware that the Grand Canyon demanded respect for every rapid bend and hidden rock beneath the surface. Observers noted the precision in their preparation, yet even the most methodical efforts could not predict the sudden disappearance that would leave search teams grappling with an unexplainable absence. Hydrologists, geologists, and field assistants reviewed maps and equipment lists, checking each raft for oars, life jackets, and meteorological instruments that might provide critical readings during their journey. Flow meters, sediment samplers, and water quality devices were each tested multiple times, ensuring accuracy for measurements along the river's course. The team's discipline reflected years of experience navigating remote sections of the canyon, yet the Colorado River remained an untamed force, indifferent to human planning. Every detail was accounted for, yet the canyon itself would soon claim their presence in a way that no preparation could prevent. The Colorado River twisted and churned, carving its path through ancient sandstone with hidden currents, submerged rocks, and swirling eddies that could overturn a raft in an instant. The water's surface alternated between deceptively calm stretches and turbulent rapids, masking dangers below that were invisible even to trained eyes. The team's experience allowed careful navigation, but the unpredictable forces of the river created a constant tension. Each paddle stroke required precise timing, and each maneuver risked exposure to the river's hidden power, emphasizing the ever-present possibility that even a single misstep could have catastrophic consequences. Notebooks and instruments captured detailed observations of sediment patterns, water temperature, and flow velocity, forming a meticulous record of the river's shifting dynamics. Diagrams illustrated eddies, submerged rock formations, and narrow passages that could affect both navigation and data collection. These observations, recovered later, offer the clearest insight into the team's careful methodology, which abruptly ends near the last confirmed location. Logs reveal methodical attention to protocol, making the disappearance all the more confounding, as every planned measurement was followed until a sudden disruption erased all signs of their presence. Wind funneled through canyon walls in unpredictable gusts, rattling rafts and challenging the researchers' ability to maintain course while operating equipment. Narrow passages amplified these forces, pushing boats into turbulent eddies that could capsize even the most secure craft. Audio recordings captured the river's roar alongside the canyon's whistle, creating an environment both disorienting and perilous. Despite vigilance, the river's energy and the canyon's vertical walls rendered escape or rescue difficult. These conditions illustrate how even experts with years of experience could be overwhelmed, reinforcing the mystery of how the team could vanish so completely. A sharp bend marked the last confirmed position, where a sampling buoy floated loose, and several personal items were found scattered along a small sandbar. Life jackets, partially submerged bags, and a notebook wedged against a rock suggested sudden disturbance, yet no tracks led inland. The river's currents may have carried additional items beyond retrieval, erasing vital clues. These fragments indicate abrupt interruption rather than prolonged wandering or accident, deepening the enigma. Each recovered object reflects human presence abruptly halted, leaving investigators and river guides with only partial evidence of an event that defied ordinary explanation. Experts analysing the fragments noted that some of the river sampling containers contained traces of sediment unusually disturbed, as if torn from the riverbed with sudden force, suggesting a rapid, chaotic event rather than a gradual drift. Water flow records from upstream indicated a slight but sharp rise in current that day, enough to exacerbate hidden eddies along narrow channels. Observers later speculated that the combination of these micro-fluctuations in flow, unseen underwater rocks, and the team's positioning might have created conditions where equipment and people were swept downstream almost instantly, leaving little tangible trace behind. Concern mounted when the team failed to report from scheduled checkpoints, and authorities quickly recognized the severity of the situation. The radio transmissions ceased without explanation, leaving colleagues and supervising agencies uncertain of the researchers' precise whereabouts. Search protocols were immediately activated, acknowledging that the canyon's terrain could rapidly conceal both people and equipment. The sudden disappearance transformed a routine expedition into a high-priority search and rescue mission, highlighting the Grand Canyon's ability to isolate individuals even when procedural safeguards are meticulously observed. Search operations escalated, deploying helicopters to scan sheer cliffs, small motorboats to traverse treacherous rapids, and ground crews combing surrounding trails for any trace of the missing team. Helicopters observed scattered items along sandbars, but swift currents and hidden rocks prevented recovery of more substantial evidence. Rangers reported that vertical canyon walls and sudden rapids created inaccessible areas, leaving large portions unexamined. Despite the scale and urgency of the search, the absence of the researchers remained absolute, with only scattered fragments of equipment found, providing hints but no resolution. Investigators recovered pieces of measuring instruments, notebooks, and personal gear, but these remnants offered more questions than answers. One flow meter was wedged tightly against a boulder, its readings incomplete. A notebook contained observations interrupted mid-sentence. While these artifacts confirmed that the team had been following planned procedures, they also highlighted the abruptness of the disappearance. No bodies or major wreckage were recovered, emphasizing the canyon's capacity to obscure both people and evidence. This combination of partial clues and total absence created a scenario that defied logical reconstruction. Official statements acknowledged that the case remained unresolved, emphasizing the inherent hazards of river research within the Grand Canyon. Agencies meticulously documented river flow data, wind patterns, and the team's last known positions, yet no explanation could account for the total disappearance. Reports stress that Even highly trained personnel could succumb to natural hazards, but the complete lack of survivors or witnesses left the incident categorized as mysterious. The canyon's scale and complexity, combined with the river's energy, ensured that the final moments of the team's journey would remain unknowable. Even years later, media attention and follow-up accounts cemented the event as one of the canyon's enduring mysteries. Journalists and local writers interviewed guides, rangers, and other river researchers, noting the team's expertise and the sudden disappearance that confounded both authorities and the public. The story became part of Grand Canyon lore, a cautionary tale of how human planning and preparation can be rendered insignificant by the forces of nature. The incident fed into a larger narrative of unexplained vanishings along the Colorado River, highlighting the canyon's capacity for secrecy. The disappearance prompted changes in research and river safety protocols, including mandatory check-ins, improved communication systems, and new contingency planning for all expeditions. Future teams were required to carry multiple radios, satellite devices, and emergency signaling tools, while training programs emphasized rapid response to environmental hazards. These adjustments reflected lessons learned from the 1984 incident, acknowledging that even detailed preparation could not entirely mitigate the risks posed by the canyon and its river, where natural forces could easily overwhelm human presence. Through time and tide, the Colorado River continues its course, erasing footprints and scattering debris, while holding within its currents the unresolved echoes of those who vanished along its path. Instruments, logs, and personal items remain the only tangible traces of the research team, leaving both investigators and river guides with lingering questions about their fate. The canyon's walls and the river's relentless motion have transformed human presence into legend, preserving the mystery in perpetuity. In the shadowed reaches of the Colorado's course, the canyon keeps its secrets, offering only silence and the faintest hint of what passed through its depths. The 1956 skeleton with unknown bone modifications. The limestone ledges near the inner canyon concealed a small alcove that had long been overlooked by explorers, yet it would soon reveal a discovery that confounded those who entered. The rocky recess was difficult to access, requiring careful climbing along fractured sandstone to reach a narrow ledge where the skeleton lay partially buried in sediment and small debris. Its presence was unexpected, in an area considered largely uninhabited for decades, and the surrounding terrain suggested that it had remained undisturbed by human activity. Even at first sight, the unusual positioning of the remains raised questions about both time and purpose. Upon careful inspection, a partially buried skeleton emerged from the soil, its position undisturbed, prompting immediate documentation by the field team and cautious extraction from the surrounding rock. Every bone was examined in situ before removal, ensuring photographs and sketches captured details of arrangement and orientation. Field notes recorded measurements of spacing between limbs, angles of articulation, and alignment relative to the alcove walls. Observers noted that the placement appeared deliberate, with the skeleton arranged in a way inconsistent with natural collapse or casual burial, suggesting intentional placement long before modern discovery. Closer examination revealed peculiar marks along several bones, etched with precision unlike natural wear, capturing the attention of anthropologists called to investigate the unusual find. Cuts and grooves, smooth and intentional, defied explanation from conventional erosive or predatory forces. Some modifications appeared symmetrical, while others followed patterns that hinted at unknown techniques or purposes. Specialists considered whether these could be remnants of ceremonial activity, experimental tool use, or unknown cultural practices. Despite decades of regional study, no parallel example had been documented, leaving experts grappling with the origins and intentions behind the skeletal alterations. Laboratory specialists meticulously measured each bone, noting proportions, density, and modifications that defied known patterns for either ceremonial or practical alterations documented in the region. Radiographic analysis confirmed unusual density variations in certain areas, while microscopic examination suggested precise carving or scraping rather than accidental damage. Measurements of limb length and skull morphology aligned with known anthropological ranges, but offered no insight into the markings themselves. Every test added a layer of precision to the documentation, yet each result reinforced the mystery, presenting clear evidence that the skeleton was both human and anomalous in its modifications. Microscopic analysis revealed minute striations along the edges of certain bones, suggesting the use of specialized tools whose design has no known parallel in documented Grand Canyon-era artifacts. Even under high magnification, the grooves were sharply defined and consistent in depth, indicating deliberate shaping rather than accidental marks. Traces of mineral deposits embedded within the carvings hinted at prolonged exposure before burial, further complicating attempts to establish a timeline. This combination of precision and environmental evidence suggested a level of technique that puzzled even seasoned anthropologists and challenged conventional assumptions about tool use in the region. Historical records of the Grand Canyon region indicated a variety of indigenous and pioneer activity, yet nothing in verified archives could account for the form or placement of these skeletal remains. Archaeological surveys confirmed the area's sporadic human use, including temporary camps and exploratory routes, but none described burials or manipulations resembling those observed in the 1956 find. Researchers reviewed ethnographic records, early settler diaries, and national park archives, all of which offered no precedent for bones with such consistent intentional modifications. The absence of a historical explanation heightened the mystery, suggesting that the skeleton story had been deliberately or accidentally lost to time. The condition of the bones suggested careful preservation, yet signs of erosion and mineral deposits indicated long-term exposure to environmental conditions, offering clues about the skeleton's age and context. Calcification patterns, mineral staining, and soil deposits pointed to decades of exposure, yet the markings themselves remained sharply defined, resisting the gradual blurring typically seen in naturally weathered remains. Environmental factors such as temperature fluctuations, windborne sand, and water seepage were documented to understand their potential effects, yet no combination could explain the preservation of precise modifications alongside natural decay. The bones were thus paradoxically ancient yet meticulously preserved. Local guides and authorities who witnessed the excavation reported an uneasy sense surrounding the alcove, noting the isolation and the unusual manner in which the skeleton was positioned within the rock cavity. Visitors to the site often spoke of an uncanny stillness, a quiet that contrasted with the canyon's usual wind and wildlife sounds. Rangers remarked on the difficulty of accessing the ledge, observing that the area's isolation naturally discouraged repeated human intrusion. Even brief exposure to the alcove seemed to evoke a heightened awareness, suggesting that the physical and psychological context of the canyon contributed to the enduring aura of mystery surrounding the skeleton. Detailed sketches and photographs were made before the skeleton was removed, creating a permanent record of the site, though some annotations in field notes hinted at uncertainties in interpretation. Each bone was carefully catalogued with measurements, angles, and distinctive features recorded for reference. Photographs documented the entire alcove, capturing shadows, ledges, and soil deposits that might have influenced the positioning of the remains. These visual and written records preserved aspects of the discovery that could not be retained once the bones were relocated, ensuring that even as the skeleton entered laboratory study, the canyon's original context remained accessible for future analysis. Subsequent isotope analysis offered clues about diet and geographic origin, revealing a composition unlike other known inhabitants of the Grand Canyon area. Variations in bone chemistry suggested prolonged exposure to minerals and water sources unique to remote sections of the canyon, hinting that the individual may have lived far from established settlements. The findings provided tangible evidence of a life spent largely in isolation, yet the sophisticated modifications indicated cultural knowledge and intent, creating a paradox between environment and capability that only deepened the mystery surrounding the skeleton. Across multiple analyses, experts consulted the skeletal modifications for comparative study, yet the techniques appeared inconsistent with known cultural practices, leaving professional consensus suspended between curiosity and caution. Anthropologists noted that some etchings resembled tool-assisted markings, but did not match traditional indigenous methods recorded elsewhere. Certain grooves suggested advanced manipulation, precise enough to imply knowledge of bone structure and anatomy. Despite extensive comparison to known burial rituals, ceremonial practices, and experimental archaeology studies, no satisfactory explanation emerged. The lack of parallels reinforced the sense that the skeleton represented something unique, both human and enigmatic, defying existing frameworks of understanding. Later studies tried to match the skeletal features with regional anthropological data, yet no definitive correlations emerged, and the peculiar markings remained unexplained. Carbon dating, mineral analysis, and comparative measurements were conducted, but all reinforced the uncertainty surrounding origin, age, and purpose. Researchers considered natural erosive processes, animal activity, and even early scientific experiments, yet none accounted for the combination of preservation and precise modifications. The skeleton remained a singular find, a puzzle resisting explanation, its features documented in detail yet remaining fundamentally inexplicable within established scientific or historical context. Even after many years, the find continues to spark discussion in academic circles, emphasizing the gap between observation and explanation, with every new analysis raising more questions than answers. Conferences, journal articles, and field reports reference the 1956 discovery as a cautionary tale in anthropological interpretation, highlighting both the rigor of investigation and the limitations of understanding. Scholars debate whether the skeleton represents lost cultural knowledge, an unusual natural preservation, or an artifact of unknown human activity. Each reinterpretation adds to the enigma, reinforcing the notion that some aspects of human history may remain obscured indefinitely. The Grand Canyon's shadows and recesses seem to amplify the mystery, as if the alcove itself were preserving secrets that eluded every scientific effort. Narrow ledges, hidden alcoves, and vertical walls create isolated microenvironments, concealing evidence from repeated human intrusion. Wind, light, and shifting sediment continuously alter the appearance of these spaces, leaving traces of human activity fleeting and fragmentary. The alcove that held the skeleton exemplifies the canyon's ability to harbour the inexplicable, where careful documentation, rigorous analysis, and meticulous observation can still fall short of revealing the full story. Within the canyon's hidden alcove, the skeleton endures, its enigmatic markings keeping its tale forever beyond reach. The enigmatic fires on Shiva Temple. Shiva Temple rises like an isolated fortress in the northern reaches of the Grand Canyon, a flat-topped butte bordered by sheer cliffs and tangled ridges that drop into shadowed valleys. Reports of mysterious fires along its summit first emerged in the early 20th century, noted by park rangers and surveyors navigating the plateau edges. These accounts consistently described flames appearing without discernible cause, flickering in locations inaccessible to casual hikers, and vanishing almost as suddenly as they ignited. Despite the thorough documentation by observers, no conventional explanation, whether natural combustion, human encroachment, or lightning strikes, fully accounted for the phenomena. The inaccessibility of the site has left many questions unresolved, making Shiva Temple a locus of both curiosity and unease for those who traverse the canyon. Observers frequently recorded fires that seemed to move along the upper ledges, flickering first on one ridge before disappearing and reigniting elsewhere, as though following an unseen path. A park ranger in 1932 noted a glow along the cliff face just as twilight fell, describing it as neither smoke nor reflection, but a persistent flame visible across miles of canyon floor. Other witnesses, from geologists to tourists in the 1950s, corroborated similar sightings, often emphasizing the same eerie qualities: sudden appearance, mobility, and the lack of discernible ignition source. While some dismissed these events as optical illusions or misidentified brush fires, the consistency of reports over decades made such dismissals incomplete. The geological makeup of the Shiva Temple adds to the enigma. Composed primarily of Kaibab limestone overlying Hermit Shale and Coconino sandstone, the butte's stratification provides no obvious source of spontaneous combustion. Vegetation is sparse on its plateau and ledges, reducing the likelihood of brush fires, while the limestone's non-flammable properties further contradict the presence of natural flames. Yet the flames persistently appeared along exposed rock faces or perched atop sandstone spires, suggesting a phenomenon that defied conventional geological understanding. Observers repeatedly noted that the fires left no residue, no scorched earth, and no evidence of heat sufficient to ignite surrounding materials. Eyewitnesses often described the fires in similar terms: small but intensely bright yellow-orange, and seemingly contained to precise points along the cliff edges. Some described dancing lights that resembled torches held by unseen figures, while others reported a brief flicker like gas flames, though no gas source exists in the canyon's rock layers. Accounts from the 1940s describe observers climbing narrow trails to investigate, only to find the area cold, undisturbed, and without ash or evidence of prior flame. These repeated patterns lent credibility to the reports while amplifying the mystery. Weather conditions in the region provided little explanation. Lightning strikes are rare along the isolated summit, and wind currents, while occasionally strong, could not produce the flame-like qualities observed. Reports consistently noted that the fires often occurred during clear, calm evenings, making environmental causes improbable. Even atmospheric phenomena such as reflected sunlight or optical illusions fail to account for occurrences after dark or in fog-shrouded conditions. The combination of precise timing, unpredictable location and intensity made the phenomenon resistant to conventional meteorological analysis. Historical park records reveal numerous entries regarding the unexplained fires. Ranger logs from the 1930s through the 1960s contain repeated entries of glowing lights, sometimes captured in early photographs or noted in sketches of the butte. These records document the locations, approximate duration, and observer positions, yet no investigation could reach the sources directly. Efforts to climb the plateau at night were often thwarted by the sheer cliffs and unstable footing, leaving many first-hand observations incomplete. The archives reflect both a fascination with and a frustration over the inability to resolve the mystery. During efforts to examine the phenomenon, investigators faced logistical challenges that few other Grand Canyon mysteries presented. Helicopter surveys offered partial visibility, but were limited by rotor downwash, dust, and altitude constraints. Scientific equipment of the era struggled to capture the intermittent flames with clarity, producing ambiguous data that neither confirmed nor denied the presence of a combustible source. On several occasions, observers reported the fire seeming to vanish when approached, only to reappear elsewhere on the butte, intensifying suspicions of an unknown mechanism rather than misperception. Using early infrared photography in the 1960s, attempts to map the thermal activity revealed intermittent heat signatures along the summit ridges, yet the data remained incomplete due to equipment limitations and shadows cast by the canyon walls. Observers noted that the hotspots often appeared in areas where no brush, mineral, or human presence could account for a flame. These readings suggested that the fires were not just visual illusions. Some form of localized energy emission seemed to exist, yet repeated attempts to capture or measure it definitively produced inconsistent results, leaving a tantalizing trace of evidence that never fully explained the phenomenon. A rare 1978 ranger expedition, combining climbing teams and long-range binocular observation, documented a series of simultaneous flickers along 3 separate cliffs within Shiva Temple. The lights appeared in rapid succession, lasting only seconds each, and then vanished without smoke or heat residue. Even after the team attempted direct access, no evidence of ignition was found. The report noted the uncanny precision of the flashes, their timing too regular to be entirely random, and too remote to be human-made, intensifying the sense that the canyon itself might harbour forces beyond conventional understanding. The fire's behaviour exhibited patterns that remain unexplained. They often appeared along narrow ledges, sometimes simultaneously on opposite sides of the summit, yet no connecting fuel or ignition system could account for such synchronization. Some reports suggest the flames follow fault lines or fractures in the rock, though no heat or chemical reaction has ever been documented. These unexplained patterns suggest a phenomenon highly localized and precise, almost as though the canyon itself dictated the path of the fire, defying ordinary cause and effect reasoning. Experts consulted over the years have offered theories that range from the natural to the extraordinary. Geologists point to the potential for rare mineral exothermic reactions, while physicists note the unusual refraction of sunlight on canyon walls, though neither explanation fully replicates the observed qualities. The consistency of observer reports contrasts sharply with the lack of physical evidence, creating a scenario that challenges conventional scientific interpretation. Each new attempt to reconcile observation with fact deepens the tension between what is known and what remains inexplicable. Local lore and Native American oral history provide context without direct explanation. Traditions describe the butte as a spiritual site where lights or fires symbolize transitions or warnings, though these narratives remain separate from documented 20th century observations. While such stories cannot be verified scientifically, they contribute to the perception of Shiva Temple as a place of unusual and persistent significance. For those attempting to reconcile empirical observation with cultural memory, the legend-like quality of the fires is difficult to dismiss entirely. More recent reports, from hikers and scientific visitors in the 1980s and 1990s, describe faint flickering along the cliffs captured in photographs or brief video recordings. In some cases, multiple observers documented the same flash of light seconds apart, suggesting the phenomenon's existence is not entirely subjective. Modern analysis continues to struggle with distance, lighting, and terrain, often leaving evidence fragmentary and open to interpretation. These accounts reinforce the pattern of persistent, unexplained fire along a butte that remains inaccessible and enigmatic. Curiosity and scrutiny have both failed to solve it, and the phenomenon remains unresolved. Shiva Temple's remote plateau, surrounded by sheer cliffs and hidden recesses, continues to shield the source of these fires from direct study. Each sighting, photograph, and report builds the mystery further, creating a narrative in which verifiable observation coexists with an intractable lack of explanation. Scholars, rangers, and casual observers alike are left with repeated glimpses of something extraordinary that resists scrutiny, hinting at forces beyond simple cause and effect. The canyon's winds, shadows, and the flickering horizon all conspire to preserve the illusion and the reality of these lights, leaving them as a lingering enigma in the eyes of those who witness them. In the heart of the arid expanse, Shiva Temple continues to burn in ways that no one can fully explain. The South Rim Ranger who walked into the woods and never returned. A ranger's routine patrol along the South Rim began like any other, but that day would dissolve into one of the Grand Canyon's most enduring mysteries. He moved deliberately along familiar trails, documenting flora, noting wildlife movements, and checking erosion along the cliffs, yet within hours he disappeared without a trace. Official logs would record his presence in passing, but nothing beyond the ordinary, leaving only silence where evidence should have been. Colleagues initially assumed a minor delay, yet the forest, dense and shadowed, would conceal him in ways that no search plan could anticipate. The canyon's quiet, it seemed, had claimed him. The South Rim's terrain is deceptively uniform when viewed from observation points, yet the closer one moves, the more labyrinthine it becomes. Narrow ledges descend into shadowed gullies, sudden plateaus appear where none seem possible, and rock overhangs distort perspectives. Even a highly experienced ranger can lose orientation among the folds of the forest, and the natural camouflage of twisted roots and dense undergrowth amplifies that confusion. Every step in this environment can mislead the eye, every ridge hides potential danger, and every shadowed recess may conceal movement. For the ranger, these subtleties became more than obstacles, they became erasers of his presence. His meticulous habits were well known among colleagues. He always double-checked paths, catalogued plant species carefully, and left notes on unusual animal sightings. That day, however, these methods failed to leave any usable trail. No footprints endured, no broken branches marked his passage consistently, and no echo of his whistle carried far enough to be heard. In a region where natural markers often persist for days, the absence of any clear trace was both alarming and perplexing. The ranger's discipline could not withstand the canyon's ability to hide, and what should have been visible remained utterly concealed. As the hours passed, concern grew, and a search was initiated. Teams navigated steep slopes, crossed shallow washes, and descended into shadowed gullies, all while carefully noting every potential sign of passage. Yet for every trail that seemed promising, there was another that ended abruptly, vanished beneath fallen rock, or was rendered ambiguous by animal activity. The forest complexity frustrated the searchers' expertise, and even maps proved inadequate. Time became a factor. The light shifted across the cliffs, and shadows merged with the landscape, making it nearly impossible to distinguish human movement from natural patterns. Local hikers recalled hearing sudden, unexplained noises that afternoon. Twigs snapping in isolation, rustling that did not match wind patterns, and distant echoes that could not be attributed to anyone in sight. Birds and small mammals seemed unusually agitated, their flight patterns interrupted by something invisible. While none of these auditory observations could be verified, they contributed to a growing sense of unease. For those searching, each unexplained sound was a reminder of how little could be trusted in the canyon's deceptive environment. The forest was a living puzzle, resisting all attempts at understanding. Debris later found along the trail consisted of personal items, a small water bottle, a folded map, and a hat partially obscured by leaves. These items offered few clues. None indicated a struggle, a sudden movement, or an alternate route. Forensic analysis would later note the placement seemed random, as if the canyon itself had scattered them, providing only fragments of evidence. Each object served as a silent witness to his presence, confirming he had entered the woods, but leaving the critical question unanswered. How could a person vanish without a trace in an area so frequently patrolled? Rangers and search specialists noted the unusual absence of expected environmental traces, such as displaced soil, crushed undergrowth, or impressions left by boots, which ordinarily persist even after brief passages through the forest. Seasonal rainfall had been minimal and wind patterns were insufficient to erase evidence naturally. Some investigators speculated that the ranger may have inadvertently entered one of the canyon's hidden gullies or overhangs, where natural formations could obscure even close observation. The precision with which the landscape seemed to conceal him challenged conventional tracking methods, leaving the searchers to wonder if the canyon itself had swallowed every hint of his presence. The canyon's microclimates added further complexity. Shadows shifted with the sun's progress. Moisture in shaded gullies created slick surfaces, and temperature differences caused faint mirages that disoriented searchers. Even seasoned rangers, familiar with seasonal variations and sun angles, found their perception challenged. These natural factors, combined with the rugged topography, made conventional tracking techniques nearly useless. Helicopter teams reported what appeared to be movement on distant cliffs, only to realize it was sunlight glinting off rock faces. The environment itself seemed to conspire to erase human presence. Search efforts extended into subsequent days, covering miles of interconnected trails and ledges. Teams scoured narrow alcoves, dense thickets, and shallow river crossings, systematically cataloguing every footprint, rock displacement, and disturbed branch. Despite meticulous effort, no reliable trace emerged beyond the scattered personal items. Experts remarked that in similar terrain, some evidence, such as broken vegetation or displaced soil, typically survives even extreme weather conditions. Here the canyon had nullified almost all physical signs, leaving a vacuum in the narrative that defied logical explanation. The psychological toll on search teams was significant. Volunteers and rangers alike reported a sense of unease, moments when silence felt unnatural and the weight of isolation pressing in. Natural acoustics carried distant sounds in unexpected ways, creating phantom echoes and amplifying imagined movement. Investigators noted that while the canyon is known for its serene vistas, it also has pockets of profound acoustic distortion, capable of misleading even experienced personnel. In such a setting, uncertainty became palpable, reinforcing the growing mystery surrounding the ranger's disappearance. Official reports documented the case in precise terms, emphasizing the lack of definitive conclusions. Investigators compared the incident to other unexplained vanishings in the Grand Canyon, highlighting patterns in terrain, environmental concealment, and absence of traceable evidence. Every piece of documentation underscored a frustrating reality. The ranger's fate remained unknowable. The reports became a reference point in Grand Canyon lore, illustrating how natural landscapes, even those regularly traversed, can erase human presence with an almost deliberate efficiency. Subsequent analysis by survival experts concluded that accidental injury, disorientation, or even wildlife encounters could not fully account for the complete absence of tracks. Certain natural markers, which normally endure days or weeks, were missing entirely, raising questions about the canyon's ability to obscure. These findings contributed to speculation that the Grand Canyon can act as a natural vanishing point, where the normal rules of tracking and observation fail. Even today, the area is approached with caution by rangers, hikers, and researchers aware of the story's implications. In the decades since, interest in the case has remained high. The disappearance is often cited in studies of wilderness navigation, human psychology in isolated environments, and patterns of unexplained vanishings. Modern visitors, aware of the story, tread carefully along the South Rim trails, noting the dense undergrowth, shifting shadows and narrow ledges. The ranger's legacy continues, not only in formal records, but also in the silent warning embedded in the landscape that the Grand Canyon retains secrets no human eye can fully decipher. The combination of rugged terrain, dense forest, and environmental complexity ensures that the South Rim retains its aura of mystery. Even highly experienced personnel can vanish without a trace, leaving only questions, scattered items, and echoes of sound that cannot be traced. The canyon's ability to erase human presence is unparalleled, a chilling reminder of the landscape's power. Those who patrol its trails, study its cliffs, or hike its paths encounter a landscape indifferent to inquiry, or even meticulous planning can meet complete nullification. Somewhere beyond the worn paths and jagged cliffs, the ranger's footsteps vanished entirely, leaving only the canyon's quiet memory to hint at what might have occurred. The Colorado River boater who filmed something in the fog. The river lay shrouded in a thick, creeping fog, muting every sound except the occasional slap of water against the hull. Somewhere within this obscured expanse, the boater's attention drifted toward a movement that seemed almost imperceptible at first. The morning light filtered weakly through the grey haze, making familiar cliffs appear distorted and distant. He had navigated this stretch countless times, yet the canyon seemed transformed, each bend and eddy suddenly strange. Then, as if emerging from another dimension, a shadow shifted across the mist, prompting him to raise his camera in instinctive alert, capturing what would later defy explanation. Despite years of navigating the Colorado, the canyon's walls felt strangely distant and alien under the fog, creating a sense of isolation that heightened the significance of even the faintest shapes. Rocks that once guided his path appeared like looming spectres, their outlines obscured by the swirling vapour. Every sound of the river, normally familiar and grounding, felt dulled, and the boater realised that the usual rhythm of his journey was broken. In this moment, the mist was more than weather. It was a filter separating him from certainty, framing a landscape that had quietly become uncanny and charged with subtle foreboding. The boater's camera, a standard expedition model, was held steady despite the occasional turbulence, its lens catching everything his eyes barely discerned. Droplets of condensation blurred parts of the viewfinder, yet he persisted, framing the expanse with careful adjustments. Ripples in the water caught the dim light in ways that seemed oddly irregular, refracting and twisting as if responding to an unseen hand. Every minute movement, from leaves brushing along the shore to the swirling fog above, became a potential clue. What first appeared to be ordinary river traffic began to suggest something entirely different, something deliberate and possibly intelligent. Suddenly, a fleeting silhouette appeared, not entirely like any known bird or river debris. The boater's heart quickened as he adjusted the focus, trying to follow a movement that was elusive and irregular. It shimmered through the mist, a dark form that curved and twisted, catching the dim morning light in subtle glints. No spray of water accompanied its motion, and the current seemed to pass beneath it without disturbance. He panned the camera, capturing the ephemeral form in short bursts, each frame showing a presence that defied identification, yet was undeniably real as the water beneath his vessel. Each passing second felt suspended as the river's roar combined with the muted hush of the fog. Ripples and reflections magnified in the grey light, creating illusions that could have been dismissed as tricks of perception. Yet the form persisted, its movements deliberate, almost purposeful, darting along a trajectory that avoided ordinary patterns of wildlife or floating debris. The boater's hands tightened around the camera, his mind oscillating between excitement and unease. In this tension, the canyon seemed to expand and contract simultaneously, revealing just enough to invite observation while withholding full comprehension. The shape in the mist appeared to respond subtly to his movements, shifting as if aware of being watched yet never coming fully into view. He followed its path cautiously, adjusting oars to keep the vessel steady, noting how it seemed to glide just above the water's surface. No current could explain the fluidity, and no sound accompanied its passage. Even the smallest disturbances, the splash of an unseen fish or the rustle of a distant cliff, seemed absent. Every instinct he had honed on the river suggested that this was no ordinary sighting. but a phenomenon that might never be explained. Tension mounted further when the boater realised that the fog amplified the canyon's natural acoustics. Echoes carried strangely, and every splash or shift could be mistaken for the source of the shadowy movement. Yet careful observation revealed inconsistencies. The motion persisted where echoes could not travel, the form remained visible despite obstructions, and the light reflected from it seemed impossible to attribute to ordinary surfaces. Each element, from the colour of the fog to the angles of a reflection, contributed to a visual puzzle that could not be solved by logic alone, leaving only the camera as a witness. Sounds that normally accompany the river, a distant bird, the scrape of stones, were subdued. A faint rhythm occasionally punctuated the silence, almost like a whispering or splash that did not match anything visible. The boater paused, listening intently, as though the fog itself were transmitting signals. Every instinct urged caution. Every training exercise did not explain. He considered turning back, yet the camera compelled him forward, demanding documentation. In this stretch of water, each subtle sound became evidence, and each anomaly in light and shadow hinted at a deeper mystery, a secret the canyon had kept hidden from all previous explorers. Reviewing the footage afterward revealed anomalies impossible to reconcile with known river life or debris. Shapes appeared to twist and elongate, shadows shifted against impossible angles, and glimmers of movement occurred where no source should exist. Frame by frame, the evidence contradicted rational expectations. Experts later consulted in photography and optics confirmed that ordinary fog, refraction or turbulence could not produce such consistent yet unpredictable phenomena. The camera captured something persistent and strange, leaving the boater with a haunting memory that resisted natural explanation. Other river guides and park personnel later reported visual irregularities in the same stretch during foggy mornings. Though each report varied in specifics, the general consistency suggested the presence of an ongoing phenomenon rather than isolated misperception. Tales emerged of fleeting shadows, glimmering shapes, and movements that could not be attributed to animals or water patterns. Even decades later, these accounts were revisited cautiously, often dismissed officially yet taken seriously in private logs and discussions. The canyon, it seemed, retained something elusive, occasionally revealed to those patient or observant enough to notice. Scientists consulted for perspective proposed optical illusions, water refraction, and fog distortion as possible explanations. Yet none could account for the sharp clarity of the form, its distinct contours, and its consistent trajectory. Measurements, angles, and video comparisons suggested deliberate motion, defying ordinary physics. While the boater remained cautious about speculating, the documentation compelled a sense of wonder and unease. The interplay between natural law and the inexplicable created an intersection where the Grand Canyon itself became both stage and participant in a phenomenon no one could fully define. Even after repeated analysis and extensive testimony, the incident retained its enigma. The fog, river, and cliffs acted as a frame, each element contributing to a scene that resisted closure. Attempts to recreate conditions yielded only partial success, and no subsequent sighting matched the exact patterns recorded on that morning. For the boater, the footage remained a testament to an encounter that was both real and unreconciled, a reminder that the canyon held corners beyond human comprehension. Each reflection and shadow on the river now carried echoes of that strange presence. The canyon seemed to hold its secrets in the mist, where the river twisted and vanished around each bend, leaving only fragments of sight and memory. Even after months of reflection, the boater could not shake the sense that something had observed him as much as he observed it. The water, cliffs, and fog collaborated to create a canvas both vivid and transient, a place where ordinary rules seemed suspended. The river had revealed only a fraction of its truth, and the images persisted, haunting both memory and real, suggesting that the canyon's mysteries were far from exhausted. Whatever had emerged from the fog that morning remained unresolved, an image frozen in time yet echoing with the certainty that the canyon had withheld something beyond understanding. The strange metallic echo in Haunted Canyon. A sudden metallic resonance cut through the canyon air, startling the lone hiker as though the rocks themselves had spoken back. The sound was unlike the natural hum of wind over stone, or the distant rush of the river below. It had a crisp, ringing quality that seemed almost deliberate, a vibration that settled deep in the chest and lingered longer than physics should allow. The hiker paused, scanning the jagged cliffs above and the shadowed recesses along the trail, but nothing visible could explain the source of the clangor that had echoed through the narrow gorge. What made it more unsettling was the feeling that the canyon itself had anticipated their presence, as if the metallic voice waited for human ears to respond. The walls of Haunted Canyon rise steep and irregular, creating natural amphitheatres where sound bends, twists and returns in ways that defy ordinary expectation. The geology of the canyon forms vertical cliffs, jutting ledges and fractured slabs, producing pockets and overhangs where vibrations can be trapped and redirected. Yet even with these acoustic peculiarities accounted for, the metallic quality of the echoes remained inexplicable. Scientists visiting the area noted that no known rock formations could consistently generate such sustained tonal reverberations. The canyon's structure, while impressive in both scale and composition, offered no clear mechanism to produce sounds that seemed deliberately patterned and startlingly precise. Many years of ranger logs and visitor reports note intermittent echoes, each described with similar metallic clarity, yet no visible source has ever been identified. Entries from the 1970s reference hikers hearing hammering or gong-like tones when ascending the upper ridges, often followed by an eerie stillness that magnified the effect. One 1982 note described a sound resembling a chain being struck repeatedly, fading only as the observer retreated to the trailhead. Subsequent recordings occasionally captured partial frequencies, but in every case the sound detected by the equipment differed subtly from what visitors perceived. This discrepancy fueled speculation that Haunted Canyon's acoustic anomalies are perceptual as much as physical. The first note lingered unnaturally long, a high-pitched reverberation that seemed to chase the hiker's movements along the narrow passage. As footsteps shifted, the echo followed, rising and falling in pitch as if reacting to distance. The hiker crouched near a ledge, straining to locate a crevice or metallic object that might have produced it, but the sound refused to localize. Even the nearby rocks, worn smooth by millennia of wind and water, offered no hint of their participation. The persistence of this singular tone, stretching unnaturally over seconds, left a sense that the canyon's acoustics were somehow purposeful, perhaps even sentient. An uneasy stillness followed, accompanied by a faint vibration in the chest, as though the canyon was subtly alive and aware of its human audience. Observers have long noted a psychological weight to the canyon's echoing sounds, a sensation that presence is amplified, magnified by the peculiar metallic resonance. The environment itself seemed to conspire in the disorientation, from the shifting shadows of cliff faces to the distant, muted roar of the Colorado River. This tension, combined with the untraceable source, gave the sound a foreboding character, as if the canyon reserved judgment and attention for those who dared venture too close to its walls. Utilizing portable audio devices, attempts to capture the echoes produced inconsistent results, recording fragments of sound that often differed from what was heard in person. Audio technicians attempting to document the phenomenon found that standard microphones failed to pick up the full tonal range. Some frequencies were only audible to the human ear. In controlled experiments, recordings would sometimes register clicks, bangs or low hums absent to on-site listeners, suggesting that the canyon's acoustic signature interacts unpredictably with equipment. These anomalies have become part of the legend, blurring the line between natural acoustics and perceptual mystery. A second group of hikers, arriving weeks later, described identical resonances emanating from the same ridge, underscoring the phenomenon's persistence and unpredictability. They recounted hearing a series of metallic taps that grew louder and then receded, as though some invisible mechanism was rhythmically marking the canyon's passage of time. Some reports included details of subtle shifts in tonal quality, a higher pitch followed by a soft percussive thud, mirroring accounts from previous visitors. The consistency of experience across decades has prompted questions about whether these echoes are purely geological, or if some unrecognized environmental factor is at play. Even the shifting patterns of sunlight and shadow seem to interact with the auditory experience, making each echo feel spatially intelligent and impossible to localize. During late afternoon, when light glances off upper ledges and fractures, echoes appeared sharper and more pronounced. In morning gloom, they became subdued, almost whispering. This interplay between light, perception and sound lends the canyon a dynamic, almost interactive quality. Some hikers have reported that the echoes appear to follow movement, fading as observers remain still and returning when they advance, as if responding to human motion. Geologists and acousticians suggested wind, rock density and canyon shape as contributing factors, yet these explanations failed to account for the timing and clarity of the metallic tones. Wind gusts can produce whistles through narrow passages, and rock faces can resonate when struck, but neither explains why the tones recur with precise frequency or why they consistently bear a metallic timbre. Detailed analysis of rock composition at multiple points along the canyon yielded no conductive metals capable of producing the sharp resonance. The anomaly remained resistant to scientific reduction, a reminder of nature's capacity to defy simple explanation. Those who lingered reported a disorienting effect. Familiar landmarks seemed distant or altered, and the echoes left a lingering impression of movement where none occurred. Trails appeared longer than measured, ledges seemed shifted, and the interplay of sound and sight distorted spatial awareness. Some hikers described a sense of being watched, though no human or animal presence was detected. The canyon, in these accounts, became more than a static landscape. It was a subtly responsive environment whose metallic voice challenged the boundaries of perception. Recording equipment captured signals with frequencies not fully explained by natural resonance, occasionally producing metallic clicks that spiked and faded without discernible origin. Specialists noted that even sensitive ultrasonic sensors picked up anomalous readings, suggesting an unknown source or mechanism. These signals often appeared in bursts, disappearing as abruptly as they emerged, leaving gaps in both time and explanation. To those present, the effect was tangible and immersive, yet empirical documentation was elusive, feeding a narrative of unsolved acoustic mystery. Amid the canyon's vast silence, repeated unverified sounds have been recorded, leaving behind only the faint imprint of its strange acoustics in ranger notes and visitor memories. Seasonal accounts, often corroborated by multiple witnesses, confirm that the metallic echoes are neither isolated nor fleeting. They are woven into the experience of traversing haunted canyon, a persistent, enigmatic presence that cannot be catalogued or captured in full. Each new encounter adds layers of anecdotal evidence that remain largely unexplained, reinforcing the canyon's reputation as a site of acoustic peculiarity. Sometimes, long after the hikers departed, a lingering vibration hums through the rocks, as if the canyon retains memory of its visitors' presence. Even in the absence of wind or human activity, the metallic tones occasionally manifest, suggesting that the phenomenon is more than a simple echo or natural resonance. Observers have described hearing subtle taps or ringing from places entirely inaccessible, deep within the canyon's crevices. These residual vibrations carry the feeling of continuity, as though the canyon itself archives the echoes of those who dared to enter. No one has ever traced the metallic echoes to a source, and the canyon continues to hum with secrets that refuse to be named. The Crying Woman audio captured in 2003. The first whisper of the canyon seemed ordinary until an unmistakable human-like cry shattered the quiet. Acoustic instruments installed along the south rim had recorded countless natural sounds over the years: birds, wind, distant river currents, but nothing resembled the deliberate wail that now emerged from the depths of the canyon. Those present at the recording site initially assumed a hiker was nearby, yet the cliff faces and dense vegetation left no trace of human presence. The cry repeated with an irregular cadence, rising and falling in pitch, and seemed almost directed, as if it were aware of being heard. At a narrow ledge overlooking the twisting gorge, the recorder's sensitive microphone captured every subtle vibration, from rustling leaves to sudden bursts of echoing wind. The equipment itself, designed for geological and environmental monitoring, had never detected anything remotely resembling a vocalization. When the files were transferred to the laboratory for detailed review, the analysts immediately recognized that the source defied all conventional explanations. The cry was not a single sound, but a complex layered tone that gave the impression of intelligence and intent. While reviewing the files, technicians tightened their expressions as the cry repeated, each occurrence slightly altered from the last, almost as if the canyon were improvising a mournful song. Its irregularity set it apart from typical echoes or animal calls, and the variations in pitch suggested an origin that could manipulate the surrounding acoustics. Each wailing sequence lasted just long enough to imprint a chilling sense of presence in the listener's mind, vanishing before any visual confirmation could be sought. The canyon, it seemed, had temporarily claimed the voice of something, or someone, unknown. The recording revealed details impossible to attribute to birds, insects, or shifting winds. Analysis of frequency ranges showed clear modulation at intervals inconsistent with natural sources, and the overall resonance suggested a confined origin point rather than broad environmental diffusion. The pitch rose and fell with the subtle inflections of human emotion, creating a sonic illusion of desperation and sorrow. Researchers could not determine whether the sound was biological or a unique acoustic anomaly, leaving the files in a liminal space between natural science and something far more unsettling. No combination of echoes, gusting breezes, or controlled vocalization succeeded in replicating the sound. Scientists positioned microphones at different altitudes and orientations, attempting to provoke a similar effect through artificial means, but nothing produced a comparable pattern of tonal shifts. Each experiment confirmed that the original cry contained nuances and qualities beyond the capacity of ordinary acoustics. The canyon itself seemed to participate in shaping the sound, as though the stone walls were selectively reflecting and amplifying certain frequencies. Examining records provides additional context for such phenomena. Early Grand Canyon rangers and explorers occasionally reported faint, human-like voices carried by the wind. In some cases, visitors described hearing a woman's lament echoing across the rim, yet these anecdotes were never formally documented with equipment, and the details remained anecdotal and fragmented. The 2003 recording, however, offered concrete evidence, digital proof that such an anomaly could exist in the otherwise familiar landscape of the canyon. Acoustic analysis of the recording revealed unusual frequency patterns, layered in ways inconsistent with ordinary sound propagation. Spectrographic review highlighted harmonics that would be impossible for a human voice to generate naturally and impossible for the environment to produce artificially. In essence, the recording contained both a familiar timbre, evoking human emotion, and structural elements of sound that suggested a phenomenon entirely beyond contemporary understanding of geology and acoustics. The result was simultaneously recognizable and alien, a sonic enigma captured in precise detail. Visitors who played the recording on site reported immediate physiological reactions: goosebumps, a tightening of the chest, and an uncanny sense of being observed. The cry seemed to emanate from multiple directions at once, despite originating from a fixed location on the recording. Witnesses described an almost instinctual recognition of distress embedded in the sound, as though the canyon itself had borrowed the emotional resonance of grief. The interplay of natural echoes and tonal complexity made the experience unforgettable, haunting even those who'd passed through the canyon countless times before. Environmental factors such as temperature inversion, steep canyon walls, and scattered boulders offered plausible explanations for unusual sound propagation, but no combination could fully account for the recording's clarity and complexity. The precise origin point remained unknown, with searches along nearby ledges, cliffs, and forested paths yielding no evidence of human or animal activity. Each expedition returned to the South Rim without confirmation, reinforcing the original recording's uniqueness and the enduring mystery surrounding its source. Along the rock faces, the canyon itself seemed to participate, shaping the cries in ways that defied conventional acoustic theory. Investigators mapped the cliffs, ledges, and natural alcoves to understand how the canyon's unique geometry might distort sound. Measurements of steep rock faces and overhangs showed that echoes could amplify certain frequencies, yet none fully accounted for the clarity and emotional weight of the recorded cries. Acoustic engineers noted that while some amplification could occur under specific conditions, the recording's timbre and cadence remained unlike ordinary echoes, suggesting a phenomenon that interacted with the terrain in ways still unexplained by standard physics. Subsequent field investigations deployed modern audio mapping tools, including directional hydrophones and ultrasonic scanners, to examine the canyon's acoustic environment. Researchers hoped to trace the cry to a specific location or identify resonant cavities capable of producing such sound. Despite these efforts, all results were inconclusive, and the canyon appeared to retain its secret. The phenomenon remained undisturbed, a single artifact of sound existing simultaneously in time and memory, impossible to replicate or fully explain. Documented anecdotes from rangers and hikers over decades corroborate the canyon's peculiar auditory behaviour, though none provide the precision or consistency of the 2003 recording. Some reports describe sobbing or wailing during periods of fog or after thunderstorms, suggesting a link between environmental conditions and the manifestation of the sound. Yet the persistent element in all accounts is its human-like quality, a voice that seems emotionally charged despite having no verifiable origin. In this way, the canyon becomes an actor, shaping perception as much as any physical process might. The phenomenon remains unclassified, resisting categorization within the conventional frameworks of wildlife, geology, or atmospheric science. Researchers continue to debate whether the cry represents a rare natural resonance, an undocumented biological source, or an entirely unexplained acoustic phenomenon. Each hearing of the recording reinforces a chilling impression of presence and consciousness, hinting at a hidden layer of the canyon yet to be understood. The sound, as ephemeral as it is vivid, challenges assumptions about both the natural world and the boundaries of perception. Preserved in archival files, the recording is studied and revered by those who have examined it closely, yet its origin remains unresolved. Attempts to simulate, analyze, or contextualize the audio continue to fail, leaving the cry as a solitary witness to some unknown force or condition within the canyon. For every explanation considered, 100 questions arise, echoing the impossibility of certainty when confronted with the canyon's strange acoustics. Deep within the canyon's hidden chambers, the sorrowful wail lingers, defying logic and memory, as if carrying a message meant for no one in particular but felt by all who listen. The abandoned 1947 military survey site. In the folds of silent cliffs and winding ledges, rusted equipment and weathered concrete pads revealed traces of human presence long erased, the 1947 military survey site lying forgotten yet strangely intact. The remnants of wooden crates, corroded metal tripods, and brittle canvas tents suggested a project abruptly abandoned, leaving behind tools frozen mid-use. Layers of dust and wind-blown sand coated every surface, as though the canyon itself had drawn a curtain over the operation. Visitors report a peculiar quiet, a sense that the stones themselves remember something those who built the site have long since vanished. Archival records reveal that the operation was conceived in the immediate post-war years, with teams tasked to perform detailed topographical mapping of the Grand Canyon's northern reaches. Military interest centered on geological formations, river navigation, and potential aerial routes for strategic purposes, though much of the project's documentation was redacted or lost over time. Survey instruments included theodolites, compasses, and early photogrammetric cameras, delicate and unwieldy in the canyon's rugged terrain. Contemporary maps note triangulation points and reference coordinates, but the connection between recorded measurements and what exists on the ground remains inconsistent and puzzling. When explorers first stumbled upon the site decades later, they reported strange alignments of markers and partially buried tools, details that appeared at odds with any documented surveying procedure. Wooden stakes carved with indistinct symbols were embedded into cliff edges, while metal rods protruded at precise angles that did not correspond with known geodetic benchmarks. Some instruments, though rusted, still bore calibration numbers that hinted at measurements taken beyond the site's apparent boundaries. Witnesses describe a sense of intentional order, as if the surveyors had been following a logic now indecipherable, leaving a puzzle deliberately encoded in the canyon's unforgiving topography. The canyon's unforgiving climate, sweltering summers, bitter winters, and sudden desert storms meant that any prolonged stay would test even the most experienced surveyors. The scarcity of water sources, sudden flash floods, and vertiginous cliffs amplified the hazards of such remote work. Yet these conditions alone do not explain the site's sudden abandonment, nor why teams would leave behind detailed notes, fragile instruments, and even personal items. Letters and field journals recovered later suggest the personnel expected the project to continue, recording daily coordinates and environmental observations as though certain obstacles would resolve themselves, but the abrupt cessation of entries remains a haunting anomaly. Between the weathered concrete pads, scattered notebooks and instruments bore faint markings despite years of exposure. Some pages noted topographic angles, while others included sketches of the river and cliff formations, measurements that cannot be reconciled with modern cartography. Among the tools were partially functioning compasses, spirit levels and surveying chains, some of which showed unusual wear patterns, as though manipulated for purposes beyond standard mapping. The juxtaposition of meticulous calculations and haphazard equipment placement suggested both precision and disorder, leaving investigators puzzled over whether the survey had encountered interference, human or environmental, that forced an unplanned departure. Comparing operational logs with what remained on site revealed puzzling inconsistencies. Personnel listed as completing assignments in areas where no evidence of their presence could be found. Some reports described observation points atop cliffs inaccessible without specialized climbing gear, yet no corresponding traces of such ascents exist. Equipment placement does not always match logged coordinates, and in certain instances, measurements appear to have been recorded multiple times for the same location, raising questions about redundancy or deliberate misdirection. These discrepancies hint at either confusion among surveyors or perhaps a deliberate concealment of activities, deepening the site's enduring mystery and the canyon's stubborn silence. Local accounts describe canyon rangers and hikers encountering oddities in the immediate aftermath, from unusual tracks that vanished mid-ledge to distant sounds of equipment operating without human touch. Some hikers reported seeing shadows moving near the abandoned pads, though no one was present, and cameras occasionally captured fleeting glimpses of figures partially obscured by canyon walls. While skeptics attribute these incidents to wind, echoes, or imagination, the sheer number of consistent reports lends weight to the impression that something unusual transpired, something beyond simple human error or environmental hazard. The canyon seemed to conceal more than abandoned tools, hinting at forces or intentions not fully understood. Geological surveys of the surrounding area uncovered anomalies, metallic deposits and magnetic deviations, that could have interfered with compasses and other surveying instruments. Certain minerals concentrated in unexpected locations caused compasses to behave erratically, while early photogrammetry cameras recorded distortions in shadows and angles that modern equipment cannot replicate. The anomalies suggest the surveyors may have been unknowingly contending with environmental factors that rendered some measurements unreliable. Whether these natural quirks contributed to the project's abandonment or merely complicated a routine task remains unclear, though they provide a tantalizing layer of scientific mystery intertwined with the site's enigmatic history. Unexplained traces of radio equipment among the rubble hint at attempts at long-distance communication, though no records indicate the survey team established a functioning signal network. Rusted antenna mounts and fragments of insulated wiring suggest hurried installation, and some cables disappear into crevices, leaving their purpose ambiguous. Contemporary reports mention fleeting bursts of static heard by nearby hikers years later, which could have been echoes of early military transmissions or simply environmental interference. Whatever the origin, these remnants imply that the surveyors' operations may have included experimental communication tests, adding another layer of complexity to the canyon's already confounding enigma. In recent years, drone footage and LiDAR mapping have documented the site with precision, revealing that some survey markers appeared to have been deliberately repositioned. Elevated scans show stakes embedded in impossible alignments, and concrete pads slightly rotated or offset from their original orientation. Such manipulation could reflect human tampering after the site was abandoned, but no records suggest a later presence, and no artifacts from subsequent visitors corroborate intentional modification. These findings provoke questions about whether the original surveyors had intended secret measurements, or if the canyon itself, through erosion or subtle geological shifts, altered the markers over decades. Suggestions from experts, whether pointing to logistical errors, supply shortages, or the canyon's formidable terrain, cannot fully resolve the lingering discrepancies. While ration shortages, fractured communications, and harsh weather might explain why the site was left in disarray, they cannot account for the apparent intentionality in marker placement, the precision of partial measurements, or the instruments found displaced in patterns that suggest purposeful activity. Each theory addresses fragments of evidence, yet the complete picture remains elusive, a puzzle anchored in both documented facts and the canyon's inscrutable environment. Further confounding the record of faint readings captured on old survey devices, seemingly triggered by nothing, or instruments found displaced in ways that defy any clear rationale. Some theodolites recorded angles pointing toward empty ledges or across sheer drops, while early cameras captured blurred streaks in the sky or along the river that do not correspond to natural shadows. These anomalies, persistent yet subtle, suggest either technical malfunctions amplified by the canyon's conditions or interactions with forces not accounted for in conventional surveying. The combination of human oversight, environmental hazards, and these unexplainable readings keeps the site shrouded in uncertainty. The 1947 survey site endures as a quiet enigma, an intersection where human ambition clashes with the canyon's unyielding vastness, leaving traces that suggest both purpose and oversight, yet refuse to reveal their story completely. Though the instruments have long corroded and the journals faded, the alignment of markers, the scattered remnants of equipment, and the subtle anomalies in the landscape persist, inviting speculation. Visitors often leave with more questions than answers, sensing that the canyon guards its secrets meticulously, a silent testament to human curiosity confronted by unyielding wilderness. Long neglected, the abandoned pads and corroded instruments seem to whisper faintly of intentions lost to time, suggesting that some mysteries of the Grand Canyon may never be fully unraveled. The disappearing shadow form at Tweep Overlook. Shadows seem to gather where no light source existed, a fleeting form that observers would later call the Tweep apparition. Witnesses described a shape moving along the rim as though it were aware of those who watched, drifting silently and with no apparent origin. Park staff confirmed the overlook had no recent disturbances or wildlife activity capable of producing such an effect, yet multiple visitors captured fleeting impressions on video, often distorted or blurred. The phenomenon was subtle enough to escape attention at first, but those who witnessed it described a sense of presence, like a consciousness occupying a space just beyond perception. Among the first to notice the phenomenon were hikers who had paused at the overlook, reporting an unsettling sense of motion nearby. They recalled glimpsing a dark, elongated figure that seemed to shimmer, shifting in outline but never fully forming. Instruments such as handheld cameras or smartphones consistently failed to capture it clearly, producing only ambiguous streaks or shadows. Even seasoned observers admitted the experience was disorienting, as though the eye recognized motion, but the brain could not assign it a source. Recollections from separate groups overlapped remarkably, suggesting a repeatable pattern rather than a random coincidence, raising questions about the nature of the figure and its intentions. Instruments intended to track wind and temperature occasionally registered inexplicable readings, coinciding precisely with the shadow's appearance. Weather stations near the rim detected sudden, localized drops in temperature that lasted mere seconds before normalizing. Small gusts of air appeared where there should have been none, sometimes displacing leaves and dust in ways that defied expected patterns. Audio recorders picked up subtle low-frequency hums, barely perceptible but consistent with the timing of the apparition. Scientists reviewing the data found no conventional explanations. The irregularities were isolated, short-lived, and positioned exactly along the path the shadow seemed to trace, suggesting a physical effect accompanying an otherwise immaterial presence. An irregular chill swept through the area at moments matching eyewitness accounts, though meteorological data suggested otherwise. Temperatures measured by handheld devices remained steady, yet observers described a sudden, penetrating cold that seemed to emanate from a point just beyond reach. The phenomenon produced goosebumps, shivers, and even a faint sense of pressure in the chest, yet left no trace of frost or condensation. Veterans of Grand Canyon treks noted the sensation as distinct from natural gusts or shade, a localized anomaly that appeared synchronized with the shadow's movement. The effect was fleeting, vanishing as quickly as it arrived, and only those present could report its intensity. Some explorers described a feeling of vertigo, as if the air itself had warped around the shadow before it vanished entirely. Standing near the edge, they sensed a slight imbalance despite stable footing, sometimes losing track of distant features against the horizon. The disorientation lasted only seconds, yet left a lingering impression of something beyond comprehension, prompting many to step back from the precipice. Attempts to recreate the effect with multiple observers failed, reinforcing its unpredictability. Psychologists consulted later suggested it could be a neurological response to high-altitude visual stimuli, yet none could account for the consistent correlation with the shadow's appearances, which remained the central puzzle. Historical documents, long tucked in the ranger archives, hinted at odd occurrences in the same location decades prior. Early 20th century records included reports of flickering dark shapes along the rim and unidentifiable sounds at night, often dismissed as hallucinations or misperceptions. Some accounts described figures that disappeared when approached, paralleling modern observations. These archival notes suggested that the phenomenon was not entirely new, though documentation was sporadic and anecdotal. Comparisons between past and current sightings revealed recurring patterns. Location, time of day, and even behaviour of the figure remained remarkably consistent, indicating a persistent, perhaps cyclical anomaly within the landscape. The shape's form appeared mutable, sometimes vaguely humanoid, sometimes formless, resisting any attempt at photographic clarity. Observers noted limbs that appeared elongated or indistinct, features that shifted depending on angle and lighting. Video recordings produced only fragmented outlines or shadows, never a definitive image. Experts in optics suggested that glare or reflection could explain minor distortions, but multiple independent reports across different observers defied these explanations. The figure seemed to challenge perception itself, altering its appearance according to the viewer's perspective. This elusiveness reinforced the sense of a conscious presence, a shape aware of being observed yet never fully committing to a recognizable form. Local oral traditions spoke of spirits inhabiting high ledges, possibly offering context for the inexplicable presence that modern visitors encountered. Indigenous stories mentioned shadowy figures tied to the cliffs, often interpreted as guardians or warnings to those who approached sacred terrain. While these accounts did not describe a specific Tweep shadow, they emphasized the region's long-standing association with unexplained visual phenomena. Folklorists suggested that such stories, preserved through generations, could reflect encounters with recurring environmental or perceptual anomalies, now interpreted through cultural frameworks. Whether myth or memory, these narratives lent historical depth to the apparition, suggesting that its appearance might be entwined with human perception as much as with physical reality. Electromagnetic sensors, left running overnight, sporadically displayed spikes that defied any conventional explanation. Readings surged without interference from known devices or power lines, aligning with the area where the shadow had been observed earlier. While no signal was consistently repeated, the correlation between spikes and sightings was striking, prompting speculation about a possible energy field influencing perception. Technicians ensured the equipment was properly grounded, ruling out malfunctions, yet the anomalies persisted. Some hypothesized that fluctuating geomagnetic activity could interact with the human brain, potentially generating both visual and emotional responses, though no direct causation could be conclusively demonstrated. Behavioral patterns suggested the shadow reacted to human presence, yet left no trace of footprints, debris, or sound. Observers reported it lingering longer when approached cautiously and retreating or disappearing when attempts were made to record it closely. Unlike natural wildlife, the figure exhibited no consistent flight pattern or avoidance instinct, instead responding selectively. This responsiveness hinted at an unknown intelligence or force shaping its behavior. The effect extended beyond vision. Hikers described subtle pressure changes and a sense of being watched, reinforcing the notion that the apparition's presence encompassed more than simple light or shadow manipulation. Repeated efforts to provoke or track the apparition failed, reinforcing the notion that it obeyed unknown or unmeasurable forces. Cameras, laser pointers, and physical markers yielded no measurable results, as though the figure existed outside conventional constraints. Those who attempted to linger in its path often found themselves compelled to retreat, experiencing both fatigue and disorientation despite otherwise favourable conditions. The unpredictability contributed to a pervasive tension, as if the environment itself conspired to maintain the shadow's secrecy. Scholars visiting the site noted a remarkable consistency in its resistance to detection, suggesting a phenomenon both persistent and evasive. Even seasoned guides admitted that no rational framework could account for the fleeting figure or its timing. Their extensive experience navigating the rim, familiar with wildlife, atmospheric distortions and optical illusions, offered no plausible explanation. Yet the apparition persisted, brief but undeniable, leaving observers with lasting impressions of something that defied categorization. Each sighting, however brief, seemed to etch itself into memory with heightened clarity, creating a cumulative record of inexplicable interactions. Experts concluded that while environmental factors might partially influence perception, the full scope of the Tweep shadow remained beyond current scientific understanding. Its presence continues to evade explanation, leaving the Tweep shadow suspended between observation and impossibility, ever fleeting yet unmistakably there.